Marcus Hale stood in a courtroom staring at the judge who would decide his daughter's fate and recognized him instantly. 3 days ago, Marcus had saved this man's daughters from a storm. Now, that same man held Marcus's entire world in his hands. Would one act of kindness save him, or would it destroy everything he'd fought for? If you want to see how one decision on a rain-soaked highway changed everything, stay until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights of Pete's all-night diner buzzed overhead like dying wasps, casting a sickly yellow glow across cracked vinyl booths and coffee-stained counters. Marcus Hale moved through the late-night chaos with mechanical precision, his body operating on autopilot while his mind circled the same terrifying thought over and over. 3 days. He had 3 days left. Order up. Pete's gravel voice cut through the clatter of dishes. Table 7 needs a refill, Marcus. You sleeping on your feet again? Marcus grabbed the coffee pot, its heat barely registering through the calluses that had formed on his palms from years of hard work. On it, boss. He was 34 years old, but the mirror had started showing him someone older, deeper lines around his eyes, gray creeping into his dark hair at the temples, shoulders that carried weight visible and invisible. He moved to table 7, where a couple sat hunched over pancakes, their teenage daughter scrolling through her phone with the casual indifference of someone who'd never worried about where her next meal would come from. More coffee? Marcus asked, his voice friendly despite the exhaustion that had settled into his bones like cold rain. The woman looked up with barely concealed impatience. Finally, we've been waiting forever. Marcus poured without comment, years of service industry work having taught him that some battles weren't worth fighting. Besides, he couldn't afford to lose this job. Not now, not with everything on the line. Anything else I can get you folks? The check, the man said without looking up from his phone. We're late for a movie. Late for a movie. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. Not resentment exactly, but a hollow ache for a life where the biggest concern was making a showtime. He processed their payment, watched them leave a mediocre tip, and cleared their table with the same steady efficiency he brought to everything. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at it during a lull, and his heart clenched at the message on the screen. Daddy, are you coming home soon? I miss you. Lily. The words were spelled perfectly. She was smart. His little girl, always had been. At 6 years old, she read at a 4th grade level and asked questions that made him see the world fresh every single day. She was the reason he breathed, the reason he kept going when every part of him wanted to collapse. He typed back with one hand while wiping down the counter with the other. Soon, baby. Be good for Mrs. Chen. Love you more than stars. It was their phrase, the one he'd whispered to her every night since she was born. I love you more than stars, Daddy, she'd whisper back, her small arms tight around his neck. 3 more days until a family court judge decided whether those moments would continue or become just memories. Marcus! Pete emerged from the kitchen, his apron stained with grease and something that might have been ketchup. You're cut. Place is dead anyway. Get out of here. Marcus glanced at the clock. 11:45. You sure, Pete? I can stay until close. You've been here since 4. Go home to your kid. Pete's weathered face softened slightly. How's that holding up? The custody thing? The question hung between them, heavy with concern, and the kind of careful distance people maintained when they didn't know how to help. Marcus stripped off his apron, folding it with more care than it deserved. Hearing's on Monday, Marcus said quietly. Judge will decide if I'm fit to have full custody. You're the best damn father I've ever seen, Pete said with sudden fierceness. Any judge with eyes can see that. Marcus wanted to believe him. God, he wanted to believe it so badly it hurt. But the law didn't run on what should be. It ran on evidence and arguments and lawyers who cost more per hour than Marcus made in a week. Thanks, Pete. I'll see you tomorrow. The night air hit him like a slap as he pushed through the diner's door. Spring in the city meant unpredictable weather, and tonight the sky roiled with dark clouds that promised violence. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a warning that went unheeded by the sparse late-night traffic still moving through downtown. Marcus's truck sat in the employee lot, a 15-year-old Ford that burned oil and made concerning noises, but refused to die completely. He'd named it Old Faithful, and right now, it represented freedom in the only way that mattered. It could get him from one job to another, from shift to shift, from this moment to the next. He climbed in, turned the key, and listened to the engine cough to life. The dashboard clock glowed green, 11:53. If he drove straight home, he could get 4 hours of sleep before his morning shift at the warehouse started at 6. 4 hours. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. His phone buzzed again. Marcus expected another message from Lily, but instead it was from his lawyer, even at this ungodly hour. Need to go over testimony tomorrow. Can you meet at 2 p.m.? It's important, Marcus. The opposition is pushing hard on the stability angle. Stability. The word tasted bitter. What they meant was money. What they meant was that Jennifer's new husband had a 6-figure income and a house in the suburbs, while Marcus worked 2 jobs and lived in a 3-room apartment above a bodega. What they meant was that somehow, despite everything, despite Jennifer's 3 DUIs and the time she'd left Lily alone overnight when she was only 4, the system still saw wealth as synonymous with fitness. Marcus typed back, "I'll be there. Thank you for everything, Rachel." Rachel Chen, no relation to his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had taken his case pro bono through the legal aid clinic where she volunteered. She was sharp, dedicated, and brutally honest about his chances. "It's not impossible," she told him during their first meeting. "But it's not good, Marcus. She has resources. You have love. The system should value that equally, but it doesn't always work that way." Rain began to patter against the windshield as Marcus pulled out of the parking lot. Within minutes, the patter became a downpour, sheets of water that turned the streets into rivers and reduced visibility to almost nothing. He flipped the wipers to their highest setting, but they could barely keep up. The highway was nearly deserted. Smart people stayed home in weather like this, but Marcus wasn't smart people. He was a man with no choice, driving through a storm because his daughter was waiting, and his next shift started in 6 hours and time never stopped, never slowed, never gave him a moment to catch his breath. Thunder cracked overhead, so loud it seemed to split the sky. Lightning followed immediately, illuminating the world in stark white before plunging it back into darkness. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white, and focused on the road ahead. That's when he saw them. At first, they were just shapes in the rain. A car pulled onto the shoulder, hazard lights blinking weakly. As he drew closer, Marcus made out more details. A sleek silver Mercedes, expensive and out of place on this working-class stretch of highway. 2 figures stood beside it, hunched against the rain. Marcus's foot moved toward the brake automatically, then hesitated. He should stop. That was the decent thing, the human thing. But he couldn't afford decent right now. He couldn't afford to be late, to lose sleep, to add one more complication to a life that was already threatening to collapse. The figures came into sharper focus. Young women, no, girls, teenagers maybe. One was waving frantically at passing cars, her arm movements desperate and afraid. Marcus thought of Lily, 6 years old and small for her age, with her mother's blue eyes and his stubborn chin. He thought of his daughter alone and afraid, stuck on a highway in a storm, hoping someone would stop. His foot pressed harder on the brake. "Damn it," he muttered, pulling onto the shoulder behind the Mercedes. "Damn it, damn it, damn it." The rain soaked him instantly as he climbed out of the truck. It was the kind of rain that found every gap in clothing, that turned the ground into mud and made every step treacherous. He jogged toward the 2 figures, raising his voice to be heard over the storm. "You need help?" They spun toward him, and in the flash of lightning that followed, Marcus got his first clear look at them. Identical twins, maybe 17 or 18 years old, with long, dark hair plastered to their faces and expensive clothes that were now thoroughly ruined. The fear in their eyes was naked and real. "Our car died," one of them said, her voice shaking. "We've been stuck here for 20 minutes and no one will stop." "We're not serial killers or anything," the other added quickly, desperately. "We just need help, please." Marcus moved past them to the Mercedes, popping the hood. The rain made examination difficult, but he'd grown up fixing cars with his father, before cancer took him when Marcus was 19, and some knowledge became instinct. "When did it die?" he called back. "Right after that last big lightning strike," the first twin said. She moved closer, wrapping her arms around herself. "Everything just went dead. The whole dashboard." Marcus peered at the engine, using his phone's flashlight to illuminate the components. Modern luxury cars were more computer than machine, complex systems that required specialized diagnostic tools. But some problems were universal. Your sisters? He asked, more to keep them calm than because he needed the answer. Twins, they said in unison, then shared a brief, weak smile. I'm Claire, said the one on his right. This is Emma. Marcus. He traced wiring with his fingers, looking for anything obvious. Where were you headed? Home, Emma said. We were at a friend's house for dinner. Our parents are going to kill us. Thunder punctuated her words. Marcus found what he was looking for, a loose battery terminal, corroded and barely maintaining contact. The lightning strike had probably caused a surge that knocked it free. I need tools, he said. Stay here. He jogged back to his truck, grabbing the battered toolbox he kept behind the seat. The rain hadn't let up at all. If anything, it was getting worse. Wind whipped across the highway, strong enough to make him stagger. Back at the Mercedes, Marcus worked quickly, tightening the terminal and cleaning the corrosion as best he could in the impossible conditions. His hands were steady despite the cold, despite the exhaustion, despite everything. You do this for a living? Claire asked, watching him work. Fix cars? I work at a warehouse in the mornings, Marcus said, grunting as he leveraged the wrench. Diner at night, but I grew up working on cars with my dad. 2 jobs? Emma's voice held something Marcus couldn't quite identify. That must be really hard. He almost laughed. Hard didn't begin to cover it. Hard was waking up at 5 after 4 hours of sleep. Hard was missing Lily's school play because he couldn't get the shift covered. Hard was lying awake at 3 in the morning, calculating bills and knowing the numbers didn't add up and never would. Sometimes you do what you have to do, Marcus said simply. He gave the terminal one final tighten, then gestured toward the car. Try starting it now. Claire slid into the driver's seat, water dripping from her hair onto expensive leather. The engine turned over once, twice, then caught with a purr that sounded like money. Relief flooded her face. Oh my God, she breathed. Oh my God, thank you so much. Marcus closed the hood, then moved to the driver's window. You should be okay now, but get it checked out properly. That terminal needs to be replaced. How much do we owe you? Emma had appeared beside her sister, already reaching for a purse that probably cost more than Marcus's rent. Nothing, Marcus said. Just get home safe. Are you sure? Claire looked at him with something like wonder. You just saved us. Please, let us pay you something. I'm sure. Marcus was already backing away, eager to get back on the road. Every minute here was a minute less of sleep, a minute closer to the edge of the cliff he was trying not to fall over. Wait, Emma called. At least tell us your last name. We want to thank you properly. But Marcus was already jogging back to his truck. He didn't need thanks. He didn't need anything except to get home to his daughter and somehow find the strength to face another day. The Mercedes pulled away as Marcus climbed back into Old Faithful, its taillights disappearing into the rain. He sat for a moment, water pooling beneath him, and allowed himself one shaky breath. Then he put the truck in gear and drove toward home. The storm followed him the whole way, thunder and lightning and rain that seemed determined to wash the world clean. But some things couldn't be washed away. Some things stuck to you like stains, like Jennifer's lawyer's words during the last hearing. Mr. Hale works admirable hours, Your Honor, but a child needs stability, not an exhausted father who's never home. Admirable hours. They'd made it sound like a character flaw, like loving his daughter enough to work himself to the bone was somehow proof he wasn't fit to raise her. Marcus pulled into the narrow alley behind his apartment building at 12:45. The rain had finally started to ease, though the sky still rumbled its displeasure. He climbed the exterior stairs to the second floor, his legs heavy as lead, and let himself into the apartment as quietly as possible. Mrs. Chen sat on the couch, reading a book in Korean. She looked up when he entered, her weathered face breaking into a warm smile. She fell asleep an hour ago, Mrs. Chen said softly, switching to English. Her accent was thick, but her meaning always clear. Good girl, as always, did homework, brushed teeth, no fuss. Thank you, Marcus said, reaching for his wallet. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'd manage. You always manage. Mrs. Chen waved away the bills he offered. Next week. He looked dead on feet.
Mrs. Chen, next week, she repeated firmly. Take care of yourself, Marcus. That baby needs you healthy. She left before he could argue, pulling her cardigan tight against the lingering storm. Marcus locked the door behind her, then moved through the small apartment, turning off lights and checking windows with the efficiency of routine. Lily's room was barely big enough for the twin bed, dresser, and bookshelf that filled it, but Marcus had made it as close to perfect as his budget allowed. Glow-in-the-dark stars covered the ceiling. He'd spent hours applying them, creating constellations he'd learned from his father. Her walls held drawings she'd made, wild explosions of color and imagination.
A shelf sagged under the weight of library books, changed out every week, each one carefully protected with the paper covers she insisted on making. She lay curled on her side, breathing softly, one arm wrapped around the stuffed rabbit he'd given her for her 3rd birthday. Marcus stood in the doorway, just watching, and felt his heart crack open the way it did every time he looked at her. She had his dark hair, but Jennifer's delicate features. She had his determination, but her own wild creativity. She was the best parts of both of them, and the part that was purely, magnificently herself. He moved to her bedside, kneeling down so he was eye level with her sleeping face. Gently, so gently, he brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "I love you more than stars," he whispered. She stirred slightly, a small smile touching her lips, but didn't wake. Marcus stayed there for a long moment, memorizing everything, the scatter of freckles across her nose, the way her eyelashes fanned against her cheeks, the soft sound of her breathing. 3 days from now, a judge would decide if he got to keep these moments, or if they would be stolen away, rationed out into weekend visits and supervised time. The thought made him physically ill. Finally, he forced himself to stand. He had 4 hours until his alarm went off. 4 hours to sleep, to let his body recover even a fraction, to find the strength to do it all again tomorrow. In his own room, barely more than a closet with a bed, Marcus peeled off his wet clothes and collapsed onto the mattress without bothering to dry off. Rain still pattered against the window, softer now, almost gentle. Thunder rumbled in the distance, the storm moving on. His last thought before sleep took him was of 2 girls on a highway, scared and stranded, and how easy it would have been to drive past, how close he'd come to driving past. But he hadn't. For better or worse, for reasons he couldn't fully explain even to himself, he'd stopped. Marcus didn't know it yet, but that choice, that single moment of deciding to be decent when he couldn't afford it, had just changed everything. The alarm shrieked at 5:30, dragging Marcus from something that wasn't quite sleep. He silenced it and lay still for 10 seconds, giving himself that small mercy before the day began. His body ached in the specific way that came from too little rest and too much work, a deep bone weariness that never quite went away anymore. He rose, dressed in the dark, and padded quietly to the kitchen. Coffee first. Always coffee first. While it brewed, he made Lily's lunch, the same routine he'd perfected over 6 years. Sandwich cut into triangles, apple slices with a squeeze of lemon to keep them from browning, carrot sticks, a juice box, and one small treat. Today's treat was a chocolate chip cookie from Pete's, wrapped carefully in a napkin. He added a note written on the back of a receipt. "You're braver than you think. Love, Dad." He left notes every day. Sometimes they were encouragement, sometimes silly jokes, sometimes just reminders that he loved her. After the hearing, Jennifer's lawyer had presented them as evidence, desperate attempts to buy the child's affection, and Marcus had wanted to rage at the injustice of it. But Rachel had gripped his hand under the table and warned him with her eyes, "Don't react." So he'd sat there, silent, while they turned his love into something ugly. The coffee finished brewing. Marcus poured it into a travel mug, added sugar he couldn't afford to give up, and drank half of it standing at the kitchen counter. Through the window, dawn was just beginning to stain the sky gray. The storm had passed completely, leaving everything scrubbed clean. He checked on Lily one more time, still sleeping peacefully, then left a note for her on the kitchen table. "Had to leave early. Mrs. Chen will walk you to school. Be good. Love you more than stars." The warehouse shift started at 6 and lasted until 2. Marcus spent those 8 hours moving boxes, operating forklifts, organizing inventory in a massive space that echoed with the sounds of work. His supervisor, a man named Dennis, who'd never met a regulation he couldn't ignore, ran the place like a fiefdom. But the pay was slightly better than minimum wage, and they didn't ask questions about flexibility, so Marcus kept his head down and his mouth shut. "Hail!" Dennis shouted across the warehouse floor. "Loading dock now! Truck's waiting!" Marcus jogged to the loading dock, where a semi sat with its doors open like a hungry mouth. He spent the next 3 hours loading boxes onto pallets, wrapping them in plastic, and helping guide them into the truck with precision timing. His back screamed, his shoulders burned. He ignored both. At noon, he got his 30-minute lunch break. Instead of eating, he found a quiet corner and called Rachel. She answered on the second ring. "Marcus, good timing. I was just reviewing our evidence package." "Is it enough?" The question came out more desperately than he intended. "Everything we've submitted, is it enough?" Rachel was quiet for a moment, and that silence told him everything. "We have a good case. Your work ethic, your dedication, the stability you've provided despite your financial situation. Lily's teacher wrote a beautiful letter. Mrs. Chen's statement about your character is compelling. But Jennifer has resources we can't match. She's got doctors testifying about her sobriety, therapists talking about her growth, character witnesses from her new social circle. And Michael, her husband, he's a respected finance executive. The optics matter, Marcus. They shouldn't, but they do." Marcus pressed his forehead against the cold metal wall. "So what do I do?" "You tell the truth on Monday. You be yourself, which is a damn good father. You let the judge see what I see every time we meet, someone who would die before letting his daughter down." Rachel's voice turned fierce. "And you trust that sometimes the system works the way it should." "Sometimes." The word hung between them, full of all the times it didn't. "I'll be at your office at 2 for prep," Marcus said. "Good. And Marcus, try to rest this weekend. You need to be sharp on Monday." Rest. As if that were possible. As if he could turn off the anxiety that had taken up permanent residence in his chest, the fear that kept him awake even when his body was desperate for sleep. He ended the call and checked his phone. A text from Mrs. Chen. "Lily had good day at school. Teacher says she wrote beautiful story. We are making dinner. Come home when you can." The kindness of it, the simple generosity, made his throat tight. Mrs. Chen had been feeding Lily dinner most nights for the past 6 months, refusing payment, insisting it was what neighbors did. She was 73, living on a fixed income, and she gave more than people with everything. Marcus made it through the rest of his shift on autopilot. At 2, Dennis finally released him, and he drove straight to Rachel's office downtown. She practiced out of a legal aid clinic in a building that had seen better decades, but her mind was sharp as cut glass. They spent 2 hours going over his testimony, rehearsing questions the opposing counsel would ask, preparing for every angle of attack. "They're going to hit you on your work schedule," Rachel warned. "They'll argue that you're never home, that Lily spends more time with Mrs. Chen than with you." "I'm working to take care of her. How is that a bad thing?" "It's not, but they'll frame it differently. They'll paint Jennifer's situation, stay-at-home mother, financially secure, available 24/7, as superior stability." "She left Lily alone overnight," Marcus said, his voice hard. "She drove drunk with our daughter in the car, twice that we know of. How is that stable?" "It's not, and we'll make that clear. But people change or claim to. She's been sober for 11 months, attending meetings, seeing a therapist. The judge will factor in rehabilitation." Marcus wanted to put his fist through something. Instead, he took a deep breath and nodded. "What else?" They continued until 4:30. By the time Rachel finally let him go, Marcus's head was swimming with strategies and warnings and the terrible knowledge that none of it might matter. The judge held absolute power, and there was no predicting which way he'd rule. Marcus drove to the elementary school, parked in the pickup zone, and waited. At 5 minutes after 3, Lily emerged with her class, her backpack almost as big as she was. When she saw his truck, her whole face lit up. "Daddy!" She ran to him, and he scooped her up, breathing in the scent of her hair, strawberry shampoo and playground dirt, and something uniquely her. "Hey, baby. How was school?" "It was good. We learned about the water cycle, and I finished my story, and Mrs. Patterson said it was the best in the class." The words tumbled out in an excited rush. "Can I read it to you when we get home?" "Absolutely." He buckled her into the booster seat, making sure everything was secure. Mrs. Chen said you two had fun yesterday. We made dumplings. She showed me how to fold them right. I want to make them for you sometime. That sounds perfect. They drove home through afternoon traffic, Lily chattering about her day while Marcus listened and responded and tried not to think about Monday. Tried not to imagine a future where these moments were stolen away, replaced with awkward visits under Jennifer's watchful eye. At home, Mrs. Chen had left dinner, the dumplings Lily mentioned, plus vegetables and rice. They ate together at their small kitchen table, and Lily read him her story about a girl who could talk to stars. It was imaginative and sweet and entirely her, and Marcus felt pride so fierce it hurt. After dinner came homework, then bath time, then the nightly ritual of brushing teeth and choosing pajamas, and reading together in her bed. Tonight's book was one they'd read dozens of times, Where the Wild Things Are, but Lily never tired of it. "Daddy?" she asked when he'd finished reading, her voice small in the darkened room. "Is everything okay?" Marcus's heart clenched. "What do you mean, baby?" "You seem sad. You're sad a lot lately." He set the book aside and pulled her close, feeling her small body fit perfectly against his. "I'm not sad when I'm with you. You know that, right? You're my favorite part of every single day. But you're sad other times." There was no point lying to her. Lily was too smart, too perceptive. Sometimes grown-ups have things they worry about, but that's not for you to worry about, okay? Your only job is to be 6 and amazing, which you already are. She was quiet for a moment, then, "Is it about Mommy?" Marcus's breath caught. They didn't talk about Jennifer much. He tried to never speak badly about her, no matter how much he wanted to. "What makes you think that?" "I heard you on the phone once. You were talking about court and custody, and I know what those words mean, Daddy. I'm not a baby." No, she wasn't. She was 6, going on 60, too aware, too understanding. Marcus pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "There's a hearing on Monday," he said carefully. "The judge is going to make some decisions about where you'll live and how much time you'll spend with me and your mom." "But I want to live here. With you." "I know, baby, I know." "Will the judge let me tell him that I want to stay with you?" "The judge will make the decision that he thinks is best for you." But I want to stay with you," she repeated, more insistently. "You're the best daddy in the whole world. You work so hard, and you always make me lunch with notes, and you know all the constellations, and you never yell, and you let me stay up late on Fridays, and hey! Marcus hugged her tighter, feeling her small body shake with the force of emotion she was too young to carry. "It's going to be okay. I promise it's going to be okay." He hoped he wasn't lying. Eventually, Lily's breathing evened out and she fell asleep in his arms. Marcus stayed there, holding her, watching the glow-in-the-dark stars rotate slowly above them, and made silent promises to whoever might be listening. "Let me keep her. Please, let me keep her. I'll work harder, be better, do whatever it takes. Just let me keep her." The stars didn't answer. They never did. Saturday and Sunday blurred together in a haze of work and worry. Marcus picked up extra hours at the diner, trying to bank as much money as possible against whatever the future held. He took Lily to the park on Sunday afternoon, pushing her on swings until his arms ached, helping her across monkey bars, watching her play with other children, and feeling gratitude and terror in equal measure. Sunday night, he tucked her in as always, read her 3 stories instead of 1, and lingered in her doorway longer than usual. "Big day tomorrow," she said sleepily. "Are you nervous?" "A little," he admitted. "You'll do great. You're the bravest person I know." The faith in her voice broke something inside him. Marcus crossed back to her bed, knelt down, and took her small hands in his. "Listen to me. No matter what happens tomorrow, no matter what the judge decides, I need you to remember something. I love you more than anything in this entire world, more than stars, more than oceans, more than every good thing that ever was or ever will be. That will never change, okay? Never." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "I love you too, Daddy." "I know, baby. Now sleep. Dream about good things." He watched her drift off, then retreated to his own room, where he lay awake until 3 in the morning, running through testimony in his head, imagining every possible outcome, and praying to a God he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. When Monday morning arrived,
Marcus dressed in his only suit, bought secondhand for his father's funeral 16 years ago and still too big in the shoulders. He made Lily breakfast, walked her to school personally, and held her an extra long moment before she went inside. "See you after school," he said, his voice steady despite everything. "Good luck, Daddy." The courthouse was downtown, a massive stone building that seemed designed to make people feel small. Marcus met Rachel on the steps at 9:30. She wore a sharp blazer and carried a briefcase full of documents and hope. "Ready?" she asked. "No." "Good. Overconfidence would worry me." She squeezed his arm briefly. "Remember what we practiced. Be honest, be yourself, and trust the process." They entered together, passing through security, taking an elevator to the third floor. The family court waiting area was full of people in various states of stress. Parents fighting for custody, social workers with overstuffed files, lawyers conferring in hushed tones. Jennifer was already there with Michael and her attorney, a shark named Whitmore, who wore expensive suits and practiced smile that never reached his eyes. Jennifer had changed since Marcus last saw her, thinner, more polished, her hair styled in a way that probably cost more than his weekly grocery budget. She didn't meet his eyes. Michael stood beside her, one hand proprietarily on her shoulder. He was everything Marcus wasn't: wealthy, educated, comfortable in places like this. He wore his success casually, the way people did when they'd never known anything else. At 9:50, a bailiff emerged from the courtroom. "Case number 2024 FC 7839, Hale versus Hale. All parties please enter." This was it. The moment everything came down to. Marcus stood, his legs unsteady, and followed Rachel through the doors. The courtroom was smaller than he expected, more intimate. Wooden benches, fluorescent lighting, and at the front a raised bench where the judge would sit. Everything was designed to reinforce hierarchy, to remind everyone who held power here. They took their seats, Marcus and Rachel on one side, Jennifer and her team on the other. The divide felt absolute. "All rise," the bailiff intoned, the Honorable Judge Richard Castellano presiding. Marcus stood with everyone else, his heart hammering so hard he could hear it in his ears. This was the man who would decide everything. This was the person who held Lily's future in his hands. The judge entered from a side door, and Marcus's entire world tilted on its axis. He knew that face. He knew those features, that bearing, that particular way of moving. The judge ascending to the bench was the same man whose daughters Marcus had saved in the storm. Their eyes met across the courtroom, and recognition flashed, instant, mutual, and absolutely devastating. Judge Richard Castellano's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, recognition, and something else Marcus couldn't name. The bailiff finished the formal opening, and Judge Castellano took his seat, his face now carefully neutral. He shuffled papers on his desk, taking a moment that seemed to stretch forever. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured and professional. "Please be seated. We're here today for a custody hearing in the matter of Lily Hale, age 6. I've reviewed the case files submitted by both parties." His eyes moved between Marcus and Jennifer, lingering a half-second longer on Marcus. "This court takes these matters very seriously. The well-being of the child is our sole priority." Marcus couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The man deciding Lily's fate was someone he'd helped 3 days ago, someone who owed him a debt, or who might resent the obligation, might bend over backward to prove impartiality by ruling against him. Judge Castellano's gaze met his again, just for a moment, and Marcus saw it there. The judge recognized him, remembered that night, and had absolutely no idea what to do about it. Neither did Marcus. The hearing was about to begin, and everything Marcus had feared, everything he'd prepared for, suddenly seemed meaningless in the face of this impossible coincidence. Had stopping to help those girls saved him, or had it just destroyed everything? The silence in the courtroom stretched like pulled taffy, thin and fragile, threatening to snap at any moment. Marcus sat frozen in his chair, his mind racing through the implications of what had just happened. Judge Richard Castellano, the man whose daughters he'd saved from a storm 3 nights ago, was now the person who would decide whether he kept custody of Lily. Rachel leaned close to Marcus, her voice barely a whisper. "Do you know him?" Marcus shook his head slightly, not trusting himself to speak. He didn't know the judge, not really.
He'd never learned the man's name, never seen his face. He'd only helped two scared teenagers on a highway and driven away without a second thought. But the judge knew. Marcus could see it in the careful neutrality of his expression, in the way his gaze had lingered just a fraction too long. The question was what Judge Castellano would do with that knowledge. "We'll begin with opening statements," the judge said, his voice betraying nothing. "Counselor Whitmore, you may proceed." Jennifer's lawyer stood, buttoning his suit jacket with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and the kind of commanding presence that came from years of winning. "Thank you, Your Honor." Whitmore moved to the center of the room, positioning himself where both the judge and Marcus would have to look at him. This case is fundamentally about what's best for a 6-year-old child named Lily Hale, a child who deserves stability, security, and a parent who can be present in her life. Marcus's jaw tightened, but Rachel's hand on his arm kept him still. "My client, Jennifer Hale, has worked tirelessly over the past year to rebuild her life," Whitmore continued. "She has maintained sobriety for 11 months, attended Alcoholics Anonymous meetings 5 times a week, completed a residential treatment program, and engaged in intensive therapy to address the issues that led to her past mistakes. She is remarried to Michael Prescott, a successful financial executive, and they have created a stable, secure home environment in the suburbs, a home with space for Lily to grow, excellent schools, and a parent who can be present full-time." Each word landed like a punch. Marcus knew this was coming. Rachel had warned him. But hearing it spoken aloud in this formal setting made it feel inevitable, like gravity pulling Lily away from him. "In contrast," Whitmore said, his tone shifting to something that sounded like sympathy but felt like contempt. "Marcus Hale works 2 jobs, spending upwards of 60 hours per week away from his daughter. While his work ethic is admirable, the reality is that Lily spends more time with a neighbor, a well-meaning but elderly woman, than with her own father. Mr. Hale's apartment is small. His financial situation is precarious, and despite his best efforts, he simply cannot provide the stability and presence that a child Lily's age requires." "Objection," Rachel said, rising smoothly. "Counsel is arguing facts, not in evidence. Mr. Hale's financial situation, while modest, is stable. His work schedule is a result of his dedication to providing for his daughter, not a lack of commitment to parenting." "Sustained," Judge Castellano said. "Mr. Whitmore, please confine yourself to facts and save the arguments for later." "Of course, Your Honor." Whitmore inclined his head, unbothered. "The facts will show that Jennifer Hale has demonstrated genuine change and rehabilitation. She has the resources, the time, and the commitment to provide Lily with the life she deserves. We will present testimony from therapists, counselors, and family friends that support this conclusion. We ask this court to award primary custody to Ms. Hale with reasonable visitation rights for Mr. Hale." Reasonable visitation. The phrase made Marcus's stomach turn. Weekends and holidays, reduced to a visitor in his own daughter's life. Whitmore returned to his seat, and Judge Castellano nodded to Rachel. "Ms. Chen, your opening statement." Rachel stood, and Marcus noticed the way she carried herself. No wasted movement, no unnecessary flourish. She was a weapon, forged in legal aid clinics and impossible cases, and right now she was his only defense. "Thank you, Your Honor. This case isn't about wealth or work schedules or the size of an apartment. It's about love, commitment, and what has actually been best for Lily Hale for her entire life." Rachel's voice was calm but carried steel underneath. Marcus Hale has been the primary caregiver for his daughter since birth. When Jennifer struggled with addiction, and yes, she struggled to the point where she endangered their child multiple times, Marcus stepped up. When she left Lily alone overnight at age 4, Marcus was there. When she drove under the influence with their daughter in the car, Marcus was the one who got the call from police. Marcus saw Jennifer flinch at that, saw Michael's hand tighten on her shoulder. Marcus Hale works 2 jobs not because he's absent, but because he's present in the ways that matter most. He makes his daughter's lunch every morning with notes of encouragement. He helps with homework every night. He reads to her, takes her to the park, knows her teachers' names and her favorite books and the constellation patterns she likes to trace on her ceiling. Yes, he works long hours. Yes, his financial situation is modest. But Lily Hale has never wanted for love, for attention, or for stability where it counts, in knowing that her father would move heaven and earth for her.
Rachel paused, letting the words sink in.
The opposing counsel talks about change and rehabilitation, and that's commendable. But this court must consider not just where Jennifer Hale is now, but where Marcus Hale has always been, right beside his daughter, doing the hard work of parenting day in and day out. We ask this court to recognize that stability isn't measured in square footage or bank accounts. It's measured in presence, in commitment, in the kind of love that shows up even when it's exhausted, even when it's overwhelmed, even when it would be easier to walk away. Marcus Hale has never walked away from his daughter. Not once. Not ever. She sat down, and Marcus felt a surge of gratitude so intense it made his chest ache. Whatever happened today, at least he'd been defended with the same fierce love he felt for Lily. Judge Castellano made notes on his legal pad, his expression still unreadable. When he looked up, his eyes swept across the courtroom, landing on Marcus for just a heartbeat longer than necessary. "We'll hear testimony from both parties," the judge said. "Mr. Whitmore, call your first witness." The petitioner calls Jennifer Hale to the stand. Jennifer rose, smoothing her dress, something tasteful and expensive that probably came with Michael's credit card. She walked to the witness stand with careful steps, raising her right hand to be sworn in. Her voice was steady as she promised to tell the truth. Whitmore approached with the ease of someone who'd coached this performance to perfection. "Ms. Hale, can you describe for the court your journey over the past 11 months?" Jennifer took a breath, and when she spoke, there was genuine emotion in her voice. Marcus couldn't tell if it was real or rehearsed, and he hated that he couldn't tell. "It's been the hardest and most important thing I've ever done," she said. "I was in a very dark place after Lily was born. I had postpartum depression that I didn't recognize or get help for, and I self-medicated with alcohol. I made terrible choices that endangered my daughter, and I take full responsibility for that." Marcus's hands clenched into fists under the table. She'd never taken responsibility at the time. She'd blamed him, blamed stress, blamed everything except her own choices. "But you've made changes," Whitmore prompted. "I've completely transformed my life. I completed a 30-day inpatient program followed by intensive outpatient therapy. I attend AA meetings 5 times a week and have a sponsor I speak with daily. I've been sober for 11 months and 2 days." She said it like a badge of honor, and maybe it was. Marcus didn't know anymore. "I've also been in individual therapy to address the underlying issues, the depression, the anxiety, the trauma from my own childhood. I've done the work, Your Honor. Real, hard work." "And your current living situation?" Jennifer's face brightened. "I'm remarried to a wonderful man, Michael Prescott. We have a 4-bedroom home in Riverside Heights with a yard, excellent schools, and a neighborhood full of families. I'm able to be home full-time, which means I can be present for Lily in ways I couldn't before. I can help with homework, attend school events, be there when she needs me. How would you characterize your relationship with Lily now?" "It's healing," Jennifer said, and her voice cracked slightly. "I know I damaged it with my past behavior, but during our visitation time, we've been rebuilding trust. She's an amazing little girl, so smart and creative and kind. I want the chance to be the mother she deserves, the mother I wasn't capable of being before." Whitmore nodded, satisfied. "No further questions, Your Honor." Rachel rose for cross-examination, and Marcus saw Jennifer's shoulders tense. "Ms. Hale, you mentioned postpartum depression. When was that diagnosed?" Jennifer hesitated. "It wasn't formally diagnosed at the time. My therapist and I have identified it retrospectively as a likely factor." "I see. So you're diagnosing yourself with a condition to explain behavior that occurred 6 years ago?" "Objection," Whitmore said. "Argumentative." "I'll rephrase," Rachel said smoothly. "Ms. Hale, how many DUIs have you had?" "2." Jennifer's voice was quieter now. "And on one of those occasions, Lily was in the car with you, correct?" "Yes, but I was barely over the limit." "You were arrested and charged with child endangerment in addition to DUI. Is that correct?" "Yes." "How old was Lily at the time?" 4. Jennifer's hands twisted in her lap. "But that was 2 years ago. I'm not that person anymore."
2 years ago, Rachel repeated. So your sobriety is actually 11 months, but your most recent endangerment of your daughter was 2 years ago. That means you continued drinking for over a year after endangering her. I was struggling. It took time to get help. How much visitation have you had with Lily over the past 6 months? Jennifer glanced at her lawyer. Supervised visitation twice a month for 2 hours. So a total of 24 hours in 6 months. And during that time, has Lily expressed desire to live with you? She's 6 years old. She doesn't understand what's best for her long term. That's not what I asked. Has she expressed a desire to live with you? She's confused. She loves Marcus, and he's done a good job of being the consistent parent. But children need stability and resources, and please answer the question. Has Lily expressed a desire to live with you? Jennifer's jaw tightened. No, but that's because she doesn't understand the full picture. Or perhaps, Rachel said quietly, it's because she knows exactly what she wants. To stay with the parent who's been there every single day of her life. Objection! Whitmore was on his feet. Counsel is testifying. Withdrawn. Rachel returned to her seat. No further questions. Judge Castellano made more notes, his face still carefully blank. Marcus tried to read something in his expression and found nothing. Did the judge remember that night? Was he grateful, resentful, conflicted? There was no way to know. The morning crawled forward with more witnesses. Michael Prescott took the stand, testifying about their stable home and his ability to provide financially. Jennifer's therapist appeared via video call, describing her client's commitment to change. A family friend spoke about Jennifer's transformation. Each testimony felt like another nail in a coffin Marcus hadn't realized was being built. During a brief recess, Marcus stood in the hallway, staring out a window at the city below. Cars moved through streets, people walked with purpose, and somewhere out there, Lily was in school, probably raising her hand to answer a question or drawing in her notebook or sharing her lunch with a friend who'd forgotten theirs. Hey! Rachel appeared beside him holding 2 cups of terrible courthouse coffee. Drink! You need the caffeine. Marcus took the cup but didn't drink. We're losing. We haven't presented our case yet. But he's going to rule against me. I can feel it. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Marcus, I need you to be honest with me. Do you know Judge Castellano? No. It wasn't quite a lie. He didn't know the man. But he knew his daughters, and that was close enough to make him sick with worry. Because the way he's been looking at you, Rachel shook her head. Never mind. Focus on your testimony. That's what matters now. The bailiff called them back before Marcus could respond. The afternoon session began with Rachel presenting their case, starting with Mrs. Chen. The elderly woman took the stand with quiet dignity, her accent thick but her meaning clear. I have lived next to Marcus and Lily for 3 years. I watched that man work himself to the bone for his daughter. Every day, every night, he puts her first. She is loved. She is safe. She is happy. Can you describe their relationship? Rachel asked. He is father and mother both. He makes her lunch, helps with homework, reads stories, answers questions. When she is sick, he stays up all night. When she is sad, he makes her laugh. When she is scared, he holds her. Mrs. Chen's eyes were fierce. That child is his whole world. Anyone with eyes can see it. Has he ever been negligent in caring for her? Never. Not once. Whitmore's cross-examination tried to paint Mrs. Chen as too old, too biased, too involved to be objective. But she met each question with unwavering certainty, and when she left the stand, Marcus saw even Whitmore looked slightly rattled. Lily's teacher testified next, describing Marcus's involvement in school events despite his work schedule, his knowledge of Lily's academic progress, the obvious bond between father and daughter. In all your years teaching, how would you rank Marcus Hale as a parent? Rachel asked. In the top 5%, the teacher said without hesitation. You can tell which children are truly loved and supported at home. Lily is one of those children. By the time Rachel called Marcus to the stand, the afternoon sun slanted through the courtroom windows, casting everything in amber light. Marcus's hands shook slightly as he raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth. Rachel began gently, walking him through his history with Lily, her birth, the early years, the growing realization that Jennifer was struggling. He described finding Lily alone at age 4, the terror of that moment, the police report he'd filed. He talked about the DUI arrests, about picking up his daughter from a police station at 2 a.m. because her mother had been stopped with her in the car. "Did you ever consider giving up custody?" Rachel asked. "Never." Marcus's voice was firm. "She's my daughter. You don't give up on your children." Describe a typical day with Lily. Marcus did, walking through the routine he'd perfected, waking early to make her lunch, leaving notes, working his shifts, coming home to help with homework and make dinner and read stories. As he spoke, he watched Judge Castellano, trying to gauge his reaction. The judge's expression remained neutral, but his eyes never left Marcus's face. "Do you love your daughter, Mr. Hale?" "More than anything in this world," Marcus said, and his voice cracked slightly. "She's the reason I breathe. I would do anything for her, work any job, face any challenge, give up anything. I'm not perfect. I don't have money or a big house or resources. But I love her with everything I have, and I show her that every single day." Rachel nodded. No further questions. Whitmore approached for cross-examination like a shark scenting blood. "Mr. Hale, you work approximately 60 hours per week between your 2 jobs. Is that correct?" "Yes." "So you're away from home roughly 60 hours per week, not including commute time." "I'm providing for my daughter." "But you're not present for your daughter during those 60 hours, are you?" Mrs. Chen is a neighbor, not a parent, a 73-year-old neighbor who, while well-meaning, is not Lily's mother or father. Whitmore's voice was sharp. "The question is simple. During your work hours, you are not present with your daughter, yes or no?" "Yes, but..." "Thank you. Now, Mr. Haley, what is your current annual income?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "Approximately $32,000. "And Jennifer and Michael's combined household income?" "I don't know exactly." "It's over $200,000. Would you agree that they can provide material advantages you cannot?" "Money isn't everything. But it provides stability. Quality schools, extracurricular activities, college savings, medical care, opportunities." Whitmore paced, building momentum. "Can you afford to send Lily to summer camp?" "No." "Can you afford music lessons, sports, tutoring if needed?" "I do what I can." "That's not what I asked." "Can you afford those things?" "Not currently, but what happens if you lose one of your jobs? What's your safety net?" Marcus had no answer for that. There was no safety net, there never had been. "Mr. Hale, you work 2 jobs because you have to, correct? Because one job doesn't provide enough income to support yourself and a child?" "Yes." "And if you had a choice, if you could afford to work less and spend more time with Lily, you would make that choice?" It was a trap, and Marcus saw it too late. "Of course." "So you acknowledge that your current situation, necessitated by financial constraints, is less than ideal for raising a child?" "Every situation has challenges. That doesn't mean..." "Thank you, Mr. Hale. No further questions." Marcus returned to his seat, feeling like he'd been flayed open. Rachel gave him a small, reassuring nod, but it did nothing to quiet the storm in his chest. Judge Castellano called a 15-minute recess, and the courtroom emptied slowly. Marcus stayed in his seat, staring at his hands. They were working man's hands, calloused and scarred, strong from lifting boxes and changing oil and doing whatever needed to be done. But they weren't enough. They'd never been enough. "Marcus," Rachel's voice was gentle. "It's not over. It feels over. The judge hasn't ruled yet. There's still closing arguments, and there's still..." She stopped, studying his face. "What aren't you telling me?" Before Marcus could respond, the bailiff called them back. The final act was about to begin. Both lawyers delivered closing arguments, summarizing their cases with the kind of eloquence that came from years of practice. Whitmore painted a picture of 2 lives, one of struggle and absence, one of stability and presence, and asked the judge which one better served a 6-year-old girl. Rachel countered with passion and precision, arguing that love and commitment mattered more than bank accounts, that Marcus had proven his dedication through years of consistent parenting, that children needed authenticity more than affluence. When both lawyers finished, Judge Castellano sat in silence for a long moment.
The courtroom held its breath. This court will take a 30-minute recess to review all testimony and evidence before rendering a decision, he said finally. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck, and Marcus felt his heart stop. 30 minutes. In 30 minutes, his entire life would change, one way or another. People filtered out of the courtroom. Jennifer and Michael left with Whitmore, their heads together in conference. Rachel gathered her papers, her movements mechanical. I need to make some calls, she said. Will you be okay? Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. He was alone in the courtroom now, except for the bailiff organizing papers at the front. The silence was oppressive, pressing down like a physical weight. Marcus closed his eyes and thought of Lily, her laugh, her questions, the way she fell asleep holding her rabbit, the constellation stars on her ceiling. Mr. Hale? Marcus's eyes snapped open. Judge Castellano stood in the doorway to his chambers, still wearing his robes, his expression unreadable. Could you step into my chambers for a moment? Everything Marcus had been taught about courtroom procedure told him this was irregular, possibly improper. But he stood anyway, his legs unsteady, and followed the judge through the door. The chambers were smaller than Marcus expected, lined with law books, a desk covered in files, and windows overlooking the city. Judge Castellano closed the door behind them, and suddenly Marcus was very aware that he was alone with the man who held his daughter's future in his hands. I'm not supposed to do this, the judge said quietly, turning to face Marcus. Speaking with you outside of court, without counsel present. It's inappropriate, possibly grounds for recusal. Marcus found his voice. Then why? Because I need to understand something. Judge Castellano's eyes were intense, searching. 3 nights ago, on Highway 95 during that storm, you stopped to help 2 young women with car trouble. There it was. The acknowledgement they'd both been avoiding all day. Marcus nodded slowly. Those were my daughters, Claire and Emma. The judge's voice was tight with emotion he'd been carefully controlling all day. They told me about you, how you stopped when no one else would, how you fixed their car in the pouring rain, how you refused payment. They said you told them you had a custody hearing coming up, but they didn't catch your name. I didn't know who you were, Marcus said quickly. I didn't know they were your daughters, or that you'd be the judge. They looked scared, and I couldn't drive past. You had every reason to drive past. You were exhausted. You were worried about your hearing. You couldn't afford the time. Judge Castellano moved to the window, staring out at the city. My daughters have everything, Mr. Hale. Private school, designer clothes, college funds, opportunities most people only dream about. But that night, they were alone and afraid, and the only person who stopped to help was a man who had nothing to spare. Marcus didn't know what to say to that. I've been a judge for 12 years, Castellano continued. I've presided over hundreds of custody cases. I pride myself on impartiality, on making decisions based solely on the child's best interests. But this, he turned back to Marcus. How do I make an impartial decision when the respondent saved my daughters 3 days ago? By forgetting it happened, Marcus said, his voice rough. By making whatever decision is actually best for Lily, regardless of what I did for your daughters. That's what a good judge would do. And what if the decision that's best for your daughter happens to align with my gratitude? How do I know I'm not being influenced? You can't, Marcus admitted. But you can ask yourself what you'd decide if we'd never met. If I was just another case number, another tired father trying to keep his kid, what would you rule then? Judge Castellano was silent for a long moment. That's what I've been trying to figure out all day. Then figure it out, Marcus said with sudden intensity. Look at the evidence. Look at the testimony. Look at what's actually been proven in that courtroom. Not at some debt you think you owe me, but at what's real and true and in Lily's best interests. Because if you give me custody out of gratitude, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I deserved it. And if you rule against me to prove your impartiality, you'll be using my daughter to make a point about your own integrity. The judge studied him for a long moment, something like respect crossing his features. My daughters said you were kind. They didn't mention you were wise. I'm not wise. I'm desperate. Marcus's voice cracked. I'm standing here in a borrowed suit, knowing my entire world is about to change, and I can't control it. I can't fix it with hard work or good intentions, or even by accidentally helping the right people. All I can do is tell the truth and hope it's enough. What is the truth, Mr. Hale? Marcus met the judge's eyes directly. The truth is, I'm not perfect. I work too much because I have to, not because I want to. I can't give Lily expensive things or fancy vacations or college savings, but I can give her every piece of who I am. I can show her what it means to keep going when everything is hard, to choose kindness when you can't afford it, to love someone more than you love yourself. Jennifer has changed, maybe. She has resources I'll never have. But I've been there every single day, and I'm asking for the chance to keep being there. Judge Castellano nodded slowly. That's what I needed to hear. What happens now? Now I make my ruling. And Mr. Hale? The judge's expression was serious. What happened 3 nights ago doesn't change the law. It doesn't change the evidence. It only reminds me that character reveals itself in small moments, moments when no one is watching and there's nothing to be gained. You revealed yours that night. I need to trust that I can see clearly enough to make the right decision regardless. Marcus understood what he was saying. The judge wouldn't let gratitude sway him, but he also wouldn't punish Marcus for an act of kindness. Whatever came next would be based on the case itself. Thank you, Marcus said, for being honest. Don't thank me yet. You might not like my decision. They returned to the courtroom separately, maintaining the appearance of propriety even though the lines had already been blurred. Rachel looked at Marcus with questions in her eyes, but he shook his head slightly. He'd explain later, or not at all. The courtroom filled again. Jennifer and Michael took their seats, Whitmore beside them looking confident. The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Castellano took the bench one final time. A folder opened before him. His face revealed nothing, and Marcus felt every heartbeat like a drum in his chest. This was it. The moment everything came down to. The judge looked up, his eyes sweeping the courtroom, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. I've reviewed all testimony and evidence presented today, and I'm prepared to render my decision in the matter of custody for Lily Hale. Marcus stopped breathing. The next words would either save his world or end it. Judge Castellano's voice cut through the silence like a blade, each word precise and measured. Marcus felt his heart hammering so hard he was certain everyone in the courtroom could hear it. This case presents a question that family courts face regularly, but never easily, the judge began, his eyes moving between Marcus and Jennifer. How do we measure a parent's fitness? Do we measure it in dollars, in square footage, in the ability to provide material comfort? Or do we measure it in something less tangible but infinitely more important, in presence, in sacrifice, in the daily choice to put a child's needs above our own? Marcus's hands gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles went white. Rachel sat perfectly still beside him, her face betraying nothing, but he could sense her tension. The petitioner has presented compelling evidence of personal transformation, Judge Castellano continued. 11 months of sobriety is commendable. Therapy, support groups, and genuine self-reflection are all signs of growth. No one in this courtroom doubts that Jennifer Hale has worked hard to become a better version of herself. Marcus felt his chest tighten. This was it. The judge was building toward a ruling in Jennifer's favor, wrapping rejection in praise. However, the judge said, and that single word made Marcus's breath catch, transformation is not the same as consistency. Change is not the same as reliability. The court must consider not just where a parent is today, but where they have been throughout a child's entire life. Whitmore shifted in his seat, his confident posture faltering slightly. The evidence shows that Marcus Hale has been the primary caregiver for Lily since birth. During the periods when Ms. Hale struggled with addiction, struggles that resulted in 2 DUI arrests, one of which included child endangerment, Mr. Hale was the stable presence in his daughter's life. When Ms. Hale was in treatment, Mr. Hale was there. When she was unable to care for their child, Mr. Hale stepped up without hesitation. Jennifer's face had gone pale. Michael's hand tightened on her shoulder. The opposing counsel has made much of Mr. Hale's work schedule and modest financial circumstances, Judge Castellano said, his tone sharpening. But this court will not penalize a parent for working hard to provide for their child. Mr. Hale works 60 hours per week, not because he's absent by choice, but because he's present in the way he can afford to be. The testimony from Mrs. Chen and Lily's teacher paints a picture of a man who, despite exhaustion and limited resources, shows up for his daughter consistently and completely. Marcus felt tears burning behind his eyes, but refused to let them fall. Not yet. Not until he knew for certain. The court has also considered the testimony regarding Ms. Hale's current living situation, the financial stability provided by her marriage to Mr. Prescott, the larger home, the ability to be present full-time. These are advantages that cannot be dismissed. However, advantages are not the same as necessity. A child does not need a 4-bedroom house to thrive. A child needs love, consistency, and a parent who has proven, not through words, but through years of action, that the child's well-being comes first. Judge Castellano paused, and in that silence, Marcus heard Jennifer's sharp intake of breath. She knew what was coming. They all knew. Furthermore, the court must address a concerning pattern in Ms. Hale's testimony. When asked about Lily's expressed preferences, Ms. Hale dismissed them as a child not understanding what's best for her long term. But a 6-year-old child who has consistently expressed a desire to remain with the parent she has always known is not confused. She is communicating her needs in the clearest way possible. The judge's gaze settled on Jennifer, and his voice took on a gravity that made the air feel heavy. Ms. Hale, your rehabilitation is admirable, and this court genuinely hopes you continue on that path. But rehabilitation does not erase history. It does not undo the times when you endangered your daughter, when you chose substances over her safety, when you were unavailable during her most formative years. You have changed, and that matters. But Marcus Hale has been unchanged in his devotion since the day Lily was born, and that matters more. Marcus's vision blurred. He blinked rapidly, trying to focus, trying to hear every word. The evidence presented today also revealed information that gives this court serious pause regarding Ms. Hale's current fitness, Judge Castellano said, his voice hardening. Testimony indicated that Ms. Hale continued consuming alcohol for over a year after the incident that resulted in child endangerment charges. This suggests a pattern of prioritizing her own struggles over her daughter's safety, a pattern that, despite recent sobriety, raises questions about judgment and priorities. Whitmore stood abruptly. Your Honor, my client has been completely forthcoming about her journey. To use her honesty against her, Mr. Whitmore, I will thank you to remain seated unless you have a procedural objection. The judge's tone left no room for argument. Whitmore sat, his jaw tight with barely suppressed frustration. This court appreciates honesty, Judge Castellano continued, but honesty about past failures does not automatically translate to future success. The burden in a custody case is not merely to show improvement. It is to demonstrate that the proposed change in custody serves the child's best interests. That burden has not been met here. Marcus's heart was pounding so hard now that he felt dizzy. Was this really happening? Was the judge actually ruling in his favor? Additionally, the judge said, the court has reviewed the supervised visitation reports from the past 6 months. While these interactions have been appropriate, they also reveal something significant. Lily is polite with her mother. She is respectful. But the bond, the ease, the natural affection, these are absent in a way that speaks volumes. A child who has been consistently parented by one individual for her entire life cannot simply transfer that attachment on command, regardless of how transformed the other parent claims to be. Jennifer was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Michael whispered something to her, but she shook her head, her hands covering her mouth. Marcus felt Rachel's hand on his arm, squeezing gently, but he couldn't look at her. He couldn't look away from the judge, terrified that if he broke eye contact, the spell would shatter, and this would all be revealed as some cruel dream. Based on all evidence presented, on testimony from multiple witnesses, and on the clear best interests of the child in question, Judge Castellano said, his voice ringing with finality, this court awards primary physical custody of Lily Hale to her father, Marcus Hale. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. For a moment he couldn't process them, couldn't believe they were real. Ms. Hale will be granted supervised visitation twice monthly for 2 hours to continue for a period of 6 months, at which time this arrangement will be reviewed. Should Ms. Hale maintain her sobriety and demonstrate continued stability, The court may consider expanding visitation at that time. However, primary custody will remain with Mr. Hale unless significant change in circumstances warrants reconsideration.
Jennifer's sobs were audible now. Whitmore was already leaning close to her, no doubt planning an appeal, but Marcus couldn't focus on any of that. He'd won. After months of fear, after sleepless nights and impossible odds, after every moment of believing he would lose her, he'd won. "Mr. Hale," Judge Castellano said, and Marcus forced himself to meet the judge's eyes. "This decision comes with responsibility. The court expects you to facilitate Lily's relationship with her mother in age-appropriate ways. She should not be burdened with adult conflicts or made to feel guilty about loving both parents. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Honor," Marcus managed, his voice rough with emotion he could no longer contain. I want Lily to have a relationship with her mother. I've always wanted that." "I believe you do, which is part of why you're receiving this custody." The judge's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Ms. Chen, please prepare the formal custody order for both parties' review and signature. Court is adjourned." The gavel struck, and the sound echoed through the courtroom like a bell announcing freedom. For a moment, no one moved. Then Rachel was pulling Marcus into a fierce hug, and he realized he was shaking, his whole body trembling with the release of months of pent-up terror and hope. "You did it," Rachel whispered. "Marcus, you did it." "We did it," he corrected, his voice breaking. "I never could have." "Yes, you could have. You already were everything that Judge needed to see." She pulled back, her own eyes bright with tears she was trying to hide behind professional composure. "Go get your daughter. Go home and be her father without looking over your shoulder." Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Across the courtroom, Jennifer was being led out by Michael and Whitmore, her face buried in her hands. Part of Marcus, the part that had once loved her, that had believed they'd build a life together, ached for her pain, but the larger part, the part that had spent 6 years putting Lily first, felt only relief. He gathered his things mechanically, his hand still shaking. As he turned to leave, he caught Judge Castellano's eye one last time. The judge gave him the briefest nod, acknowledgement perhaps, or validation, or simply recognition of one father to another. Marcus returned the nod and walked out of the courtroom a free man. The courthouse steps were bathed in late afternoon sunlight, the kind of golden light that made everything look softer, more forgiving. Marcus stood at the top of those steps and let himself feel it, really feel it, for the first time. The fear that had been his constant companion for months was gone, replaced by something so large and overwhelming he didn't have a name for it. His phone buzzed. "Mrs. Chen. Lily is asking about court. What should I tell her?" Marcus's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Tell her I'm on my way home. Tell her everything is going to be okay." He made it to his truck before the tears finally came, great wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. He cried for the fear he'd carried, for the possibility of loss he'd barely survived contemplating, for the sheer overwhelming relief that Lily was his, legally and completely his, and no one could take her away. When the storm passed, Marcus sat in his truck with red eyes and a lighter heart than he'd had in months. He started the engine and drove toward the elementary school, where Lily would be waiting with Mrs. Chen. Traffic was heavy with the evening commute, but Marcus didn't care. He had time now. He had all the time in the world. When he pulled up to the school, Lily was sitting on the front steps with Mrs. Chen, her backpack beside her, drawing in a notebook. She looked up at the sound of his truck, and her whole face transformed. She knew. Somehow, without being told, she knew. She ran to him and he caught her, lifting her off her feet, holding her so tight it probably hurt, but she didn't complain. She just wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face against his shoulder. "Did you win?" she whispered. "Yeah, baby. We won. So I get to stay with you? Forever?" "Forever," Marcus confirmed, his voice thick. "You're stuck with me, kiddo." She pulled back just enough to look at him, her blue eyes, Jennifer's eyes, searching his face. "Don't cry, Daddy. Happy things aren't supposed to make you cry." "Sometimes they do," Marcus said, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Sometimes when you're really, really happy,
The tears just come out anyway. That's weird. Yeah, it is. He set her down but kept hold of her hand. Thank you, Mrs. Chen, for everything.
The elderly woman waved off his gratitude, but her own eyes were suspiciously bright. You are a good father. Judge knows this. Everyone knows this. They drove home with Lily chattering about her day, a story she'd written, a game at recess. The funny thing her friend Emma had said at lunch. Marcus listened to every word, storing each detail like precious gems, and marveled at how normal it all seemed. How, despite the earthquake that had just rearranged his entire world, Lily's world remained steady and secure. That night, after dinner and homework and a bath, after stories and songs and the ritual of tucking her in, Marcus sat on the edge of Lily's bed and brushed the hair back from her forehead. I need to tell you something important, he said gently. Lily's expression turned serious. Okay. You know how we went to court today? How the judge made a decision about where you'll live? You said I get to stay here. With you. That's right. But you'll still get to see your mom. Not as much as before, but you'll still have time with her, and that's good. She loves you, Lily. Even when she made mistakes, she loved you. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing. Do I have to live with her sometimes? No. You'll live here, with me, but you'll visit her, and that's okay. It's good to have two parents who love you, even if they love you in different places. I don't want to hurt her feelings, Lily said in a small voice. But I want to stay here. Is that bad? Marcus's heart cracked. 6 years old and already trying to carry adult guilt. No, baby, it's not bad. You're allowed to feel safe and want to stay where you're happy. Your mom understands that, or she will eventually. Your only job is to be 6 and let the grown-ups figure out the complicated stuff. Promise you won't leave? I promise. I'm not going anywhere. I will always, always be right here. She seemed satisfied with that, her eyelids already growing heavy. Love you more than stars, Daddy. Love you more than stars, baby. He stayed until she fell asleep, watching the gentle rise and fall of her breathing, and felt peace settle over him like a blanket. This was his life now. Not borrowed time, not supervised visits, but real, permanent, uncontested fatherhood. The next morning, Marcus woke before his alarm for the first time in months. Not because he had to, but because his body had finally remembered what it felt like to rest. He made coffee and breakfast, humming under his breath, and when Lily emerged rubbing sleep from her eyes, he swept her up in a hug that made her giggle. What's gotten into you? She asked, squirming happily. I'm just happy. Is that okay? It's weird, but okay. They had breakfast together without rushing, without Marcus watching the clock and calculating minutes. He walked her to school himself instead of relying on Mrs. Chen held her hand the whole way and lingered at the gate longer than necessary just because he could. At the warehouse, Dennis noticed the change immediately. You win the lottery or something, Hale. You're practically glowing. Something like that, Marcus said, unable to stop smiling. Work was still hard, the hours still long, but the weight was different now. Before, every shift had been performed under the shadow of potential loss. Now he worked knowing that each dollar earned went toward a future that was secure, toward a daughter who was legally, completely, permanently his. During his lunch break, Marcus's phone rang. An unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Hale, this is Richard Castellano. Marcus nearly dropped his phone, the judge calling him directly. His mind raced through possibilities, each one more alarming than the last. Had there been an error? Was the ruling being overturned? Judge Castellano, Marcus said carefully, is everything all right? Everything's fine. I apologize for calling directly. It's somewhat irregular, but I wanted to speak with you privately, if you have a moment. Of course. There was a pause, and Marcus heard the judge take a breath. First, I want to assure you that my ruling yesterday was based entirely on the evidence and testimony presented in court. What I'm about to discuss has no bearing on that decision, which stands regardless. I understand. My daughters told me more about the night you helped them, how you worked on their car in the pouring rain, how you refused payment, how you were kind when you had every reason to be impatient or dismissive. The judge's voice carried an emotion Marcus couldn't quite identify. Claire and Emma are good kids, but they've grown up privileged.
They're not always aware of how most people live, the struggles that exist outside their bubble. Meeting you, seeing someone sacrifice his own time and comfort for strangers, it affected them. Marcus didn't know what to say to that. They want to thank you properly, Judge Castellano continued. My wife and I would like to invite you and Lily to dinner this weekend. Completely informal, no pressure. Just a chance for my daughters to express their gratitude and for me to do the same outside the confines of a courtroom. Marcus's first instinct was to refuse. Dinner with a judge and his family felt wrong somehow, too close to the line between grateful and indebted. But something in Castellano's voice stopped him. A genuine warmth, an offer of friendship rather than obligation. That's very kind, Marcus said slowly. Can I think about it? Of course. Take your time. My assistant will send you my contact information. If you decide to join us, just let me know. The judge paused.
And Mr. Hale? You showed up for my daughters when they needed help.
That says more about your character than anything that happened in my courtroom. You're a good man and a good father. Don't let anyone make you doubt that. The call ended before Marcus could respond. He sat staring at his phone, processing what had just happened. A federal judge had called him personally, had invited him to dinner, had called him a good man. The universe, it seemed, was full of surprises. That evening, after Mrs. Chen had picked up Lily from school and Marcus had finished his diner shift, he came home to find his daughter sitting at the kitchen table with her homework spread out before her. Math problems? He asked, hanging up his coat. Word problems. They're hard. Marcus pulled up a chair beside her. Let's figure them out together. They worked through the problems one by one, Lily's frustration gradually easing as the solutions became clear. When they finished, she looked at him with those two wise eyes. Daddy? Did something good happen? You seem different. Marcus considered how to answer that. The truth was complicated. The custody ruling, the judge's call, the sudden lifting of fear that had colored everything for so long. But Lily needed simple truth, the kind a 6-year-old could hold. A lot of good things happened, he said finally, and I'm learning how to be happy about them without waiting for something bad to ruin it. That's good, Lily said seriously. You should be happy more. I'm working on it, baby. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with the judge's contact information pulled up on his phone. Part of him wanted to decline the invitation. It felt complicated, tangled up with the custody case in ways that made him uncomfortable. But another part, the part that had stopped on that rainy highway 3 nights ago, recognized an opportunity. Not for advancement or advantage, but for connection. For Lily to see that good things could come from good choices, that the world wasn't always hard and disappointing. He typed out a text. Judge Castellano, Marcus Hale here. Lily and I would be honored to join you and your family for dinner this weekend. Thank you for the invitation. The response came almost immediately. Wonderful. Saturday at 6 p.m., I'll send the address. And Marcus, please call me Richard. We're not in court anymore. Marcus smiled at that. Richard. The judge had a first name, a family, a life beyond the bench. Just like Marcus was more than a case number, more than a struggling single father barely keeping his head above water. He was a man who'd made it through the storm. And now, on the other side, the sun was finally breaking through. Saturday arrived with perfect spring weather, warm but not hot, with a breeze that carried the scent of flowers from someone's garden. Marcus dressed in the same suit he'd worn to court, the only one he owned, and helped Lily into her nicest dress, a blue thing with white flowers that she'd worn to a wedding last summer. Where are we going again? Lily asked as Marcus carefully braided her hair. To dinner at a friend's house. What friend? I didn't know you had grown-up friends. Marcus laughed at her blunt assessment. I'm working on it. These people, I helped their daughters a few days ago when they were stuck in the rain. They want to say thank you. That's nice. Are there kids there? 2 teenagers, twins. Lily's eyes lit up. Twins? Like in that book we read? Exactly like that. The address Richard had sent led them to a neighborhood Marcus had only seen from the highway, the kind where houses sat on multiple acres, where the lawns were professionally maintained and the cars and driveways cost more than Marcus made in a year. Old Faithful looked distinctly out of place rumbling down these pristine streets, but Marcus refused to feel ashamed. He'd been invited. He belonged here as much as anyone. Richard's house was large but not ostentatious, stone and wood, with a wide porch and gardens that looked tended with care rather than hired help. Marcus parked in the circular driveway and helped Lily out, straightening her dress and his tie one last time before approaching the front door. Before he could knock, it swung open to reveal two teenage girls, identical in almost every way, with dark hair and bright eyes that lit up the moment they saw him. "You came," one of them, Claire, he remembered, said, her smile genuine and wide. "We were so excited when Dad said you'd agreed to come." "And you must be Lily," the other twin, Emma, said, crouching down to Lily's level. "We've heard you're really smart and really good at drawing." Lily, who could be shy with strangers, surprised Marcus by grinning. "I like drawing. Do you like drawing?" "I love drawing. Maybe we can draw together later?" "That would be awesome." Richard appeared behind his daughters, wearing jeans and a casual button-down, nothing like the robes and formality of court. He looked younger somehow, more approachable, and his smile was warm as he extended his hand to Marcus. "Marcus, thank you for coming. Please, come in." The house's interior matched its exterior, elegant but lived in, with family photos on the walls and comfortable furniture that looked used rather than displayed. A woman emerged from what Marcus assumed was the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She was striking, with silver threads through dark hair and laugh lines around her eyes. "You must be Marcus," she said, her voice carrying genuine warmth. "I'm Diane. Richard's told me so much about you, both from court and from what the girls shared. Thank you for helping Claire and Emma." "It was nothing," Marcus said, suddenly aware of how out of place he felt despite everyone's kindness. "Anyone would have done the same." "But they didn't," Diane said pointedly. "The girls said dozens of cars passed them that night. You were the one who stopped." Dinner was surprisingly easy. The conversation flowed naturally, with Claire and Emma asking Lily about school and her interests, Diane drawing Marcus into discussions about parenting challenges, and Richard proving to be funnier and more relaxed than Marcus would have imagined possible. They ate in a dining room with windows overlooking the garden, and for a few hours Marcus forgot about the differences between their lives and simply enjoyed being welcomed. "Lily," Emma said during dessert, "would you like to see our art studio? We have tons of supplies." Lily looked to Marcus for permission, her eyes pleading. He nodded, and she bounded off with the twins, leaving the adults at the table. "She's wonderful," Diane said when the girls were out of earshot. "You've done an amazing job with her, Marcus." "Thank you. She makes it easy." Richard refilled Marcus's wine glass. Marcus had initially declined, but Richard had insisted that one glass with dinner was fine, and settled back in his chair. "I want to thank you again, not just for helping my daughters, but for your grace during the hearing. I know the situation was awkward at best." Marcus took a sip of wine, gathering his thoughts. "It was terrifying, honestly, not knowing if you'd rule based on the case or on what happened that night. I understand that fear, but I meant what I said in chambers. I had to rule on the evidence, not on personal feelings. That's what the law demands." "And if the evidence had pointed the other way?" Marcus asked quietly. "If Jennifer had been the better choice?" Richard met his eyes steadily. "Then I would have ruled for her and lived with the guilt of it. But Marcus, the evidence was clear. You've been an exceptional father under impossible circumstances. My ruling was correct, regardless of any outside factors." Diane reached across the table and squeezed Marcus's hand briefly. "What you did for our daughters that night, stopping when you were exhausted, when you had every reason not to, that's the same character you've shown Lily every day. Richard saw that in court. We all see it now." The words settled into Marcus's chest, warm and affirming in a way he hadn't known he needed. For so long, he'd felt like he was failing, like working too much and having too little meant he wasn't enough. But maybe, just maybe, he'd been exactly enough all along. The evening wound down with coffee and easy conversation. When they finally gathered their things to leave, Claire and Emma presented Lily with a sketchbook and a set of colored pencils. "For all your drawing," Emma said, "we had extras." Marcus started to protest. It was too much, but Diane cut him off with a knowing look. "Let them give. They've been blessed with privilege. Learning to share it with grace is part of growing up."
In the car driving home, Lily clutched her new sketchbook and chattered about the twins, about their art studio, about how they'd promised to stay in touch. Marcus listened with half his attention, the other half still processing the evening. He'd entered that house as a man from a different world, someone who fixed cars in rainstorms and worked 60-hour weeks just to keep a roof overhead. He'd left as something more, a friend perhaps, or at least someone recognized as having value beyond his bank account. "Daddy?" Lily's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Those people are really nice. Are we going to see them again?" "Maybe," Marcus said. "Would you like that?" "Yeah, Claire and Emma said they'd teach me how to draw people better, and Mrs. Diane makes really good cookies." Marcus smiled. "She does, doesn't she?" That night, after the bedtime routine, after stories and songs and the glow-in-the-dark stars, Marcus stood in Lily's doorway and watched her sleep. The sketchbook lay on her nightstand, ready for tomorrow's creative adventures. His daughter was safe, happy, and completely, legally his. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Marcus Hale allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. More than okay. It was going to be good. The weeks following the custody ruling settled into a rhythm that felt almost too good to be real. Marcus kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong, but days turned into weeks and the peace held. Lily thrived with the certainty of permanence, her laughter coming easier, her questions about the future no longer tinged with anxiety. She asked about summer plans and her next birthday and whether they could get a goldfish, all with the confidence of a child who finally understood that her world was stable. But stability, Marcus was learning, came with its own complications. 2 weeks after the dinner at Richard's house, Marcus received an email from Jennifer's lawyer. His hands shook slightly as he opened it, old fear rising like muscle memory, but the content wasn't what he expected. Jennifer was formally requesting her first supervised visitation under the new custody arrangement. She'd completed additional counseling sessions, her sobriety remained intact, and she wanted to begin rebuilding her relationship with Lily. Marcus sat at his kitchen table that night after Lily had gone to bed, staring at the email and wrestling with emotions he couldn't quite name. Part of him wanted to refuse, to protect Lily from any possibility of disappointment or hurt. But a larger part, the part that had listened to Judge Castellanos' words about facilitating Lily's relationship with her mother, knew that wasn't fair. He called Rachel, who picked up despite the late hour. "Marcus, everything okay?" "Jennifer wants to start visitation. First session is scheduled for next Saturday." He rubbed his eyes, exhaustion seeping through despite the early hour. "I don't know how to feel about it." Rachel's voice was gentle but firm. "You feel however you need to feel. But Marcus, this is good. It means she's following through, respecting the court order, trying to do right by Lily. Well, what if she hurts her again? Not physically, but what if she disappoints her? Then you'll be there to help Lily through it. That's what parents do. We can't protect our kids from every disappointment, only teach them how to handle it with grace." Marcus knew she was right, but knowing didn't make it easier. When he told Lily the next morning over breakfast, her reaction surprised him. "Okay," she said simply, spooning cereal into her mouth. "Will you be there?" "The supervisor will be there. I'll be waiting right outside." "Then it's okay." She looked at him with those wise eyes. "I know you won't let anything bad happen." Her faith in him was both a gift and a weight. Marcus hoped he could live up to it. Saturday arrived with spring rain, not the violent storm that had changed everything weeks ago, but a gentle, steady precipitation that made the world smell green. Marcus drove Lily to the Family Services building downtown, where the supervised visits took place. A neutral space designed to be comfortable for children while ensuring safety. Jennifer was already there when they arrived, standing in the waiting room with her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She'd lost more weight since the hearing, and her eyes held a nervousness that Marcus recognized, the fear of a parent who knows they've failed and is desperate for a second chance. "Hi, Lily," Jennifer said softly as they approached. "Hi, Mom." Lily's voice was polite but reserved, and Marcus saw Jennifer flinch at the distance in it. The supervisor, a kind-faced woman named Ms. Rodriguez, appeared from a side door. "Lily, are you ready? We've got art supplies set up in the activity room." Lily looked to Marcus one more time, seeking reassurance. He crouched down to her level, smoothing her hair back.
I'll be right here when you're done. 2 hours, okay? You can do this. What if it's weird? Then it's weird, and we'll talk about it after, but give it a real try, okay? For yourself. She nodded, squared her small shoulders, and followed Ms. Rodriguez and Jennifer through the door. Marcus watched until it closed behind them, then sank into one of the waiting room chairs, prepared for the longest 2 hours of his week. He tried to read on his phone, but the words wouldn't stick. He checked work emails, but couldn't focus. Finally, he just sat, watching the rain through the window and thinking about how strange life had become. 6 weeks ago, he'd been terrified of losing Lily forever. Now he was voluntarily handing her over for visits with the mother who'd nearly destroyed them both and trying to believe it was the right thing to do. His phone buzzed. A text from Richard. "How are you holding up?" Marcus smiled slightly. Over the past 2 weeks, he and Richard had exchanged occasional messages. Nothing deep, but enough to establish a connection that felt increasingly like genuine friendship. It was surreal. Marcus Hale, warehouse worker and diner server, texting casually with a federal judge. But Richard had made it clear he wanted that barrier dissolved, at least in their personal interactions. Marcus typed back, "First supervised visit with Jennifer. Sitting in a waiting room trying not to climb the walls." The response came quickly. "That's hard. Want company? I'm nearby anyway." Before Marcus could respond, Richard appeared in the waiting room doorway, shaking rain from his jacket. He'd clearly come from something casual, jeans and a sweater, no courtroom formality in sight. "You didn't have to come," Marcus said, but he was grateful anyway. "I was getting coffee down the street. Figured you might need a distraction." Richard settled into the chair beside him, extending a second cup of coffee he'd been carrying. "Thought you could use this." Marcus accepted it gratefully. "How did you know I'd be here?" "Diane reminded me. She has a gift for remembering important dates." Richard sipped his own coffee. "First visit is always the hardest. Not just for Lily. For you too. I keep telling myself it's good for her, that she should have a relationship with her mother. You're right, she should, but that doesn't mean watching it happen isn't painful." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the rain providing white noise against the windows. Eventually, Richard spoke again, his voice careful. "Can I ask you something? And feel free to tell me it's none of my business." "Sure." "What made you stop that night? On the highway, with my daughters?" Richard turned to look at him directly. "You were exhausted, worried about the hearing, running on fumes. Most people would have driven past without a second thought. What made you stop?" Marcus considered the question, really considered it. "I saw them waving, and I thought about Lily, about how scared she'd be if she was stuck somewhere and no one would help. I couldn't be the person who drove past someone else's kid when I'd want someone to stop for mine." Richard nodded slowly. "That's what I thought, and that's exactly why you won custody." "The judge gave me custody because I helped your daughters?" "No," Richard said firmly. "The judge gave you custody because you're the kind of person who helps strangers even when it costs you something. Character, Marcus. It shows up in small moments and big ones, and yours showed up exactly when my daughters needed it. That same character is why Lily belongs with you." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Thank you for seeing that. Thank you for being that." They talked easily after that, about nothing and everything. Richard's work, Marcus's jobs, the logistics of raising kids, the way life never quite turned out how you planned. Richard shared stories about Claire and Emma's childhood, the challenges of raising twins, the constant fear that he wasn't doing enough despite every advantage. Marcus talked about Lily's questions, her creativity, the way she saw the world with such clarity it sometimes hurt. "She asked me last week if poor people are sad all the time," Marcus said, staring into his coffee. "I didn't know how to answer that. How do I explain that we're poor without making her feel ashamed or scared?" "What did you tell her?" "That having less money means you have to work harder and be more creative, but it doesn't mean you can't be happy. That the things that matter most, love, family, kindness, those don't cost anything." Marcus shook his head. "I don't know if that's true, though. Money matters. It mattered in that courtroom even if the ruling went my way." "Money matters," Richard agreed, "but you were right about what matters most. Claire and Emma have every material advantage, but the night they broke down, they learned something more valuable. They learned that character exists independent of wealth, that kindness can come from unexpected places, and that the measure of a person isn't in their bank account. He paused. That lesson was worth more than their college funds. Before Marcus could respond, the activity room door opened and Lily emerged with Jennifer and Ms. Rodriguez. Marcus stood immediately, searching his daughter's face for signs of distress, but she looked calm if tired. "How'd it go?" he asked as she came to him. "It was okay. We made pictures and talked about school and stuff." Lily glanced back at Jennifer, who stood in the doorway looking hopeful and heartbroken in equal measure. "Can we go home now?" "Yeah, baby. Let's go home." Jennifer stepped forward slightly. "Lily, I'm really glad we got to spend time together. Maybe next time we could—" "Maybe," Lily said, but her tone was non-committal. She was already pressing close to Marcus, ready to leave. Marcus met Jennifer's eyes over Lily's head. He saw pain there, regret, and the desperate hope of someone trying to rebuild what they'd destroyed. Part of him wanted to feel vindicated, to enjoy her suffering as payback for the hell she'd put him through. But he couldn't. He was too tired and, honestly, too happy to waste energy on old anger. "She did fine," he said quietly. "We'll see you in 2 weeks." Jennifer nodded, tears threatening. "Thank you, Marcus, for bringing her, for not making this harder than it has to be." He didn't respond to that, just guided Lily toward the exit. Richard followed, and they walked to the parking lot together. "You handled that well," Richard observed. "Didn't feel like it. Felt like running." "Sometimes grace looks like staying when you want to run." They parted ways in the parking lot, Richard heading to his car and Marcus lifting Lily into her booster seat. She was quiet on the drive home, staring out the window at the rain. "Penny for your thoughts," Marcus said. "Mom seems different, sadder." "She is different, and yeah, she's sad. She misses you." "I miss her too sometimes, but not like I miss you when you're at work. It's different." Marcus's heart ached for the complexity she was trying to navigate at 6 years old. "That makes sense. You've been with me every day, so when I'm gone you really notice. With your mom, you haven't been together as much, so missing her feels different." "Is that okay? That I don't miss her the same way?" "Baby, whatever you feel is okay. You don't have to feel any particular way about your mom. You just have to be honest about what you do feel." She seemed to accept that, relaxing back into her seat. "Can we have pancakes for dinner?" The subject change was so abrupt and so perfectly Lily that Marcus laughed. "Yeah, we can have pancakes for dinner." Life continued its new pattern. Marcus worked his shifts, came home to Lily, managed the bi-weekly visitations that gradually became less awkward if not less complicated. Jennifer remained sober, remained committed, and slowly, incrementally, Lily began to warm to her again. Not with the easy affection of before, that trust had been broken too thoroughly, but with a careful opening that might, given time, grow into something real. Marcus and Richard's friendship deepened in unexpected ways. They met for coffee occasionally, Richard seeking Marcus's perspective on parenting challenges with the twins, Marcus grateful for Richard's steady wisdom about navigating complex emotions. Diane welcomed Marcus and Lily for dinner every few weeks, and Claire and Emma took their role as Lily's unofficial big sisters seriously, teaching her art techniques and including her in their lives with genuine affection. It was during one of these dinners, about 6 weeks after the custody ruling, that Richard pulled Marcus aside while the girls were occupied in the art studio. "I want to talk to you about something," Richard said, leading Marcus to his study, a room lined with books and filled with comfortable furniture. "And I need you to hear me out before you say no." Marcus's stomach tightened. "Okay." "My firm, well, technically it's a non-profit legal organization I'm on the board of. We provide legal services to low-income families. We're always looking for people who understand the challenges our clients face, who can connect with them authentically." Richard paused, measuring his words. "We need someone to help with intake, case management, client support. It's not legal work. You don't need any special certification. But it requires empathy, patience, and understanding of what it's like to navigate systems that weren't designed with you in mind." Marcus stared at him. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you an opportunity." The pay would be about what you're making now with both your jobs combined, but you'd only work 40 hours a week. Benefits included health insurance, paid time off, retirement matching, normal office hours, so you'd be home with Lily every evening. The offer was so far beyond anything Marcus had imagined that he couldn't process it. Richard, I don't have a college degree. I've never worked in an office. I wouldn't know what I'm doing. You'd learn. And Marcus, you have something more valuable than a degree. You have experience. You've lived what our clients are living. You know what it's like to work multiple jobs and still struggle, to face a legal system that seems stacked against you, to fight for your child against impossible odds. That perspective is invaluable. This feels like charity. It's not charity, it's recognition of capability. Richard's voice was firm. I wouldn't offer this if I didn't believe you'd be excellent at it. Yes, I care about you and Lily. Yes, I'm grateful for what you did for my daughters. But this organization serves vulnerable people who need advocates who truly understand their lives. You'd be helping them while helping yourself. That's not charity. That's mutual benefit. Marcus sank into one of the leather chairs, his mind racing. 40 hours a week instead of 60. Home with Lily every evening. Benefits, stability. It sounded like a dream, which meant it probably was too good to be true. What's the catch? He asked quietly. No catch. But I won't lie. It's emotionally difficult work. You'd be hearing hard stories every day, seeing families in crisis, dealing with systems that don't always work the way they should. It requires resilience and boundaries and a thick skin. Richard sat across from him. But if anyone has those qualities, Marcus, it's you. Can I think about it? Of course. Take all the time you need. The position isn't going anywhere. That night, after another round of pancakes for dinner and stories before bed, Marcus lay awake turning the offer over in his mind. It was everything he needed but had never dared to hope for, which was exactly why it terrified him. Good things didn't just fall into his lap. There had to be a cost, a consequence, something he wasn't seeing. He called Rachel the next morning from his break at the warehouse. Marcus, hi. Everything okay with Lily? Lily's fine. I need advice about something else. He explained Richard's offer, the job, the opportunity, his reservations. Rachel was quiet for a moment after he finished. Marcus, do you trust Richard? I think so, yes. Then trust this. You've spent your whole life working yourself to exhaustion for scraps. Someone's offering you a real opportunity, and your first instinct is to assume there's something wrong with it. Her voice gentled. Sometimes good things happen because you've earned them. You've more than earned this. What if I'm terrible at it? Then you'll figure it out, the same way you've figured out everything else. But Marcus, I've worked with hundreds of clients. You have exactly what this job needs. Lived experience, empathy, and the kind of determination that doesn't quit. You'd be amazing at it. By the time his shift ended, Marcus had made his decision. He texted Richard, I'd like to accept the position. When do I start? The response came within minutes. Whenever you're ready, give notice at your current jobs and let me know your start date. We're lucky to have you, Marcus. Giving notice was harder than Marcus expected. Pete took it well, clasping Marcus's shoulder and saying he'd always known Marcus was meant for something better. Dennis at the warehouse shrugged and said he'd expected Marcus to move on eventually. People always did. 2 weeks later, Marcus started his new job at the Northeast Legal Aid Society. The office was in a converted brownstone downtown, filled with people who looked tired but purposeful. His supervisor, a woman named Patricia, who'd been doing this work for 20 years, showed him the ropes with patient efficiency. You'll mostly be doing intake interviews, Patricia explained, leading him to a small office with a desk, computer, and walls covered in resource posters. People come to us in crisis, evictions, custody battles, discrimination cases, benefit denials. Your job is to listen, document their situation, and help determine what services we can provide. Think you can handle that? Marcus looked around the office, at the posters about tenant rights and food assistance and emergency custody orders, and felt something click into place. Yeah, I can handle that. His first client was a young mother facing eviction, her eyes red from crying, her toddler son clinging to her leg. Marcus listened to her story, job loss, medical bills, a landlord who wouldn't negotiate, and saw himself reflected back. He knew that fear, that desperation, the feeling of fighting against systems designed to grind you down. "We can help," he told her, and meant it. "Let me get you connected with our housing attorney. We'll figure this out." The relief on her face was everything. This, Marcus realized, was what purpose felt like. He came home that first day exhausted but energized in a way his warehouse and diner shifts had never left him. Lily met him at the door, and for the first time in her memory, he was home before dinner without having to rush off to another job. "You're early," she said, delighted. "Can we go to the park?" "Yeah, baby, we can go to the park." They spent 2 hours at the playground, Marcus pushing her on swings and catching her at the bottom of slides and feeling the simple joy of being present without watching a clock. Other parents were there too, and Marcus struck up easy conversations, no longer too exhausted to be social. That night, after tucking Lily in, Marcus stood in his small apartment and took stock of his life. He had his daughter, legally and permanently. He had a job that paid fairly and aligned with his values. He had friends, real friends who saw him as more than just someone to pity or help. He had stability, the kind he'd never imagined possible. The storm that had changed everything, both the literal storm on that highway and the metaphorical one of the custody battle, had passed. What remained was clear sky, and for the first time in longer than Marcus could remember, he allowed himself to believe in it. His phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Heard from Patricia that your first day went well. Proud of you, friend." Marcus smiled at the word. Friend, not benefactor, not judge, not someone who owed or was owed, just friend. He typed back, "Thank you for everything. You changed my life." "No, Marcus, you changed your own life. We just got to witness it." Maybe they were both right. Maybe it was collaboration. Marcus's determination meeting opportunity. His character intersecting with circumstance. His willingness to help strangers on rainy highways, creating connections that rippled outward in ways he never could have predicted. Whatever the explanation, Marcus Hale went to bed that night with peace in his heart and hope for tomorrow. The future, once so terrifying and uncertain, now stretched ahead full of possibility. And for a man who'd spent years just trying to survive each day, the chance to actually live them felt like grace. 3 months into his new job, Marcus was sitting at his desk reviewing case files when Patricia appeared in his doorway with an expression he'd learned to recognize, the one that meant she was about to ask him to handle something difficult. "There's a walk-in," she said, her voice gentle. "Single father, custody issue, working 2 jobs. He specifically asked if there was anyone here who might understand what he's going through." She paused meaningfully. "I thought of you." Marcus saved his work and followed Patricia to the waiting area, where a man in his late 20s sat hunched in a chair, his work boots worn and his eyes carrying the exhaustion Marcus knew intimately. The man looked up when Marcus approached, and something in his expression, hope mixed with desperation, hit Marcus squarely in the chest. "I'm Marcus Hale," he said, extending his hand. "I hear you need some help." The man's handshake was firm despite his obvious fatigue. "David Chen. And yeah, I don't know where else to turn." They settled into Marcus's office, and David's story spilled out in fragments. His ex-wife had relapsed after 2 years of sobriety, their custody arrangement was falling apart, and he was terrified the courts would favor her because she had family money and a lawyer he couldn't afford to match. The specifics were different from Marcus's experience, but the underlying fear was identical, the terror of losing your child to a system that measured worth in all the wrong ways. "I work construction during the day and drive for a rideshare service at night," David said, his voice breaking. "My son is 7, and I'm missing his childhood one shift at a time. But if I don't work this much, I can't keep us afloat. And her lawyer is going to use that against me. He's going to say I'm never there, that I can't provide stability." Marcus felt the words like physical blows, each one echoing his own history. He took a breath, centering himself in the present rather than the past, and met David's eyes. "I've been exactly where you are," Marcus said quietly. 6 months ago, I was sitting in a family court waiting room, certain I was about to lose my daughter because I didn't have enough money or the right kind of stability. I worked 2 jobs just like you. I lived in fear just like you. David's eyes widened. "What happened?" The judge looked past the surface and saw what actually mattered, that I'd been there every day, that my daughter was happy and healthy and loved. But I also had help, and that's what we're going to get you. Marcus pulled out an intake form. Tell me everything, and we'll build your case together. They spent 2 hours going through David's situation, documenting everything: his consistent presence in his son's life, the evidence of his ex-wife's relapse, character witnesses, school records showing his involvement. Marcus made notes with the practice deficiency he'd developed, but underneath the professional competence, he felt something deeper. This was why he'd taken this job. This exact moment, this exact connection. When David finally left with a folder full of resources and an appointment with one of their staff attorneys, he paused at the door. Thank you for understanding, for not making me feel like I'm crazy for being scared. You're not crazy, Marcus assured him. You're a father fighting for your kid. That's the sanest thing in the world. After David left, Marcus sat in his office for a long moment, processing the weight of the interaction. 6 months ago, he'd been David. Now he was the person offering hope, the one who'd made it through the storm and could guide others through theirs. The symmetry of it was almost overwhelming. His phone buzzed with a text from Lily, sent from the tablet missus. Chen let her use after school. Daddy, Claire, and Emma are taking me to the art museum Saturday. Is that okay? Marcus smiled, typing back, That sounds perfect, baby. Have fun. The twins had become fixtures in Lily's life, treating her with the kind of patient affection that came from genuinely enjoying her company rather than obligation. They video called with her to discuss art projects, invited her to their school's public events, and generally treated her like the little sister they'd never had. Lily bloomed under their attention, her confidence growing, her world expanding. That weekend, while Lily was at the museum with Claire and Emma, Marcus met Richard and Diane for coffee at a cafe near their house. It had become a regular occurrence. These informal gatherings that had nothing to do with gratitude or debt and everything to do with genuine friendship. How's the new job treating you? Diane asked, stirring sugar into her latte. It's good. Hard sometimes, but good. Marcus told them about David, about seeing his own history reflected back, about the strange full-circle nature of it all. Richard listened with the focused attention that made him such an effective judge. That's powerful work, Marcus. You're giving people something more valuable than legal advice. You're giving them hope based on lived experience. Some days it feels like enough. Other days I wonder if I'm doing any real good. You are, Diane said firmly. Trust me on that. Richard comes home from court some nights completely depleted because he's had to make impossible choices. But the days when he sees real change, when he knows his ruling genuinely helped someone, those days make everything worthwhile. Richard nodded. Same principle applies to your work. You can't save everyone, but the ones you can help, that matters enormously. They talked for another hour, the conversation ranging from parenting challenges to neighborhood gossip to the surprisingly interesting drama of local politics. At some point, Marcus realized he was completely relaxed, laughing easily, participating without the self-consciousness that had marked his early interactions with Richard and Diane. He belonged here, in this friendship, in this life. Not because he'd earned it through suffering, but because he was worthy of it simply by being himself. Later that afternoon, Marcus picked up Lily from the museum. She bounced to the truck full of enthusiasm, clutching a museum postcard of a painting she'd loved. It was amazing, Daddy. There were paintings as big as our whole apartment, and Claire explained about perspective and light and all these cool things. Her words tumbled over each other in excitement. Can we go back sometime, just you and me? Absolutely. We'll make it a date. She chattered the whole drive home about everything she'd seen, and Marcus listened with the full attention he could now afford to give. No checking his watch, no calculating whether he had time before the next shift, no exhaustion pulling his focus away. Just presence, pure and simple. That evening, Jennifer called to schedule a conversation outside of the normal visitation routine. Marcus's first instinct was wariness, but her voice on the phone sounded tentative rather than confrontational. I was hoping we could talk, she said. Face to face, without lawyers or supervisors. Just the two of us. Marcus agreed, curiosity overriding caution. They met at a coffee shop the next day, neutral territory where neither of them had history. Jennifer looked better than she had at the custody hearing, healthier, more grounded, though her eyes still carried shadows that probably wouldn't ever fully fade. "Thank you for meeting me," she said once they'd settled at a corner table.
"I know this is awkward. It's fine. What did you want to talk about?" Jennifer wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, gathering courage.
"I want to apologize, really apologize, not the court-mandated kind. Marcus, I destroyed our family. I endangered our daughter. I put you through hell for years, and then I had the audacity to try to take Lily away from you when you'd been the one holding everything together." Marcus hadn't expected this level of raw honesty. "Jennifer, please, let me finish. I need to say this." She took a shaky breath. "I've been in therapy, really digging into why I made the choices I made, and I've realized that I was drowning, and instead of asking for help, I pulled everyone down with me. You tried to help. You tried so hard, but I was too proud or too ashamed or too broken to accept it." "You were sick," Marcus said quietly. "Addiction is a disease." "It is, but that doesn't absolve me of responsibility. I chose to drink that first time when Lily was in the car. I chose not to call my sponsor when I was struggling. I chose to prioritize my own pain over her safety." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "And watching you with her during these visitations, seeing how much she trusts you and relies on you, it kills me, Marcus. Not because I'm jealous, but because I know I threw that away. I could have had that bond, and I destroyed it." Marcus didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to agree, to confirm every word of her self-recrimination, but a larger part, the part that had been working with clients like David and seeing the complexity of people's struggles, recognized that Jennifer was doing the hardest work there was, facing her own failures without excuse or justification. "You can't get back what was lost," he said finally, "but you can build something new. Lily's starting to trust you again, slowly, carefully, but it's happening." "I know, and I'm grateful for that. Grateful that you're not poisoning her against me, even though you'd have every right to." Jennifer wiped her eyes. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve that. But I want you to know that I see you now. I see what an incredible father you are, what an incredible person you are. And I'm sorry I never appreciated it when we were together. Jennifer, we were kids when we met. We both made mistakes. Don't do that. Don't diminish what you did by lumping yourself in with my failures. You were never the problem, Marcus. You were the solution I was too messed up to accept." They talked for another hour, not about logistics or visitation schedules, but about Lily. Her personality, her dreams, the ways she was growing and changing. Jennifer shared insights from their limited time together, and Marcus offered stories from daily life. It wasn't comfortable exactly, but it was honest, real. The beginning of what might eventually become a functional co-parenting relationship. When they finally parted, Marcus felt lighter somehow. He'd been carrying anger for so long that its absence left space for something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but release. Jennifer's choices were her own to live with. His job now was to focus on the future, rather than nursing wounds from the past. The next few months unfolded with a gentle momentum that felt almost surreal to Marcus. Work continued to challenge and fulfill him in equal measure. Lily thrived, her artwork covering their refrigerator and her reading level advancing beyond her grade. The supervised visitations with Jennifer gradually became less supervised as she proved her consistency, and Lily's relationship with her mother slowly evolved into something cautiously positive. Richard and Diane became something like family, their friendship with Marcus deepening into the kind of bond that didn't require constant maintenance. Claire and Emma treated Marcus like an additional parent, seeking his advice on college applications and career choices with the trust of kids who'd learned he understood struggle in ways their privileged upbringing hadn't taught them. One evening in early fall, Marcus received a call from Patricia. "I need to talk to you about something," she said, her tone serious enough to make his stomach clench. "Can you come in early tomorrow?" Marcus spent the night alternating between worry and forced calm, running through possibilities. Had he made a mistake on a case? Had a client complained? Was he being let go? He arrived at the office 30 minutes before his usual time to find Patricia waiting with coffee and what looked like nervousness, an expression he'd never seen on her usually unflappable face. "Am I in trouble?" Marcus asked, taking the coffee. The opposite, actually. Patricia gestured for him to sit. The board of directors met last night. We've been discussing expansion. Specifically, we want to create a dedicated program for parents in custody situations. Someone who can provide peer support, connect them with resources, walk them through what to expect. Someone who's lived it and come out the other side. Marcus's heart started pounding. You want me to run it? We want you to create it, design the program, develop the protocols, hire staff eventually. It would be a promotion, more responsibility, more pay, the chance to really shape how we serve this population. Patricia leaned forward. Marcus, you're a natural at this. Every parent who's worked with you leaves feeling heard and hopeful. That's rare, and it's exactly what this program needs at its foundation. I've only been here 6 months, and in 6 months, you've demonstrated more insight and effectiveness than people who've been doing this work for years. You have something they don't: authenticity. When you tell clients you understand, they believe you, because it's true. Marcus sat back, processing. 6 months ago, he'd been working 2 jobs and terrified of losing his daughter. Now he was being offered the chance to build something meaningful, to turn his own suffering into a roadmap for others. Yes, he said, the decision surprisingly easy. Yes, I want to do this. Patricia's smile was brilliant. Good, because I already told the board you would. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Marcus threw himself into designing the peer support program, drawing on his own experience and the insights he'd gained from months of client work. He created intake protocols that prioritized emotional safety alongside legal need. He developed resource guides that acknowledged the real barriers people faced: transportation, work schedules, childcare, the exhaustion of just surviving. Richard provided invaluable input, offering the judicial perspective on what actually mattered in custody cases versus what people worried about. Diane, who had a background in social work, helped Marcus understand trauma-informed practices. Even Claire and Emma contributed, sharing their teenage perspective on what they'd wished their parents had understood during difficult times. The program launched in November with a small ceremony at the office. Local judges attended, including Richard in his official capacity. Reporters from community papers covered it. Marcus stood at a podium, looking out at faces that included his colleagues, his friends, and Lily sitting in the front row with Mrs. Chen, and felt the weight of the moment. 6 months ago, I was sitting where many of our clients sit, scared, overwhelmed, certain I was going to lose everything that mattered, Marcus said, his voice steady despite his nerves. I'm standing here today, not because I'm special, or because I did something extraordinary. I'm here because people saw my humanity when I couldn't afford to prove my worth, because a judge looked past my bank account and saw my character, because a community wrapped around me and my daughter when we needed it most. He found Lily in the crowd, her face shining with pride, and felt his throat tighten. This program exists to be that support for other parents, to say you're not alone, your struggle matters, and working 2 jobs to feed your kid doesn't make you a bad parent, it makes you a hero. We're here to make sure the system sees that too. The applause was warm and genuine, but what mattered most to Marcus was Lily's smile and Richard's approving nod, and the feeling that he'd finally found his purpose. After the ceremony, people mingled over coffee and pastries. Marcus found himself surrounded by well-wishers, including several judges he'd never met, who wanted to discuss collaborating with the program. It was overwhelming in the best way, proof that his experience wasn't just personal pain, but a tool for broader change. You did good, kid, Patricia said, appearing at his elbow. Really good. Couldn't have done it without you taking a chance on me. I didn't take a chance. I made a smart hire. She squeezed his shoulder. Now go be with your daughter. She's been waiting patiently. Marcus extracted himself from the crowd and found Lily with Claire and Emma, the 3 of them giggling over some private joke. When Lily saw him approaching, she launched herself at him with the full-body enthusiasm that never failed to make his heart swell. Daddy, you were so good. You talked in front of all those people and you weren't even nervous. I was very nervous, Marcus admitted, crouching down to her level. But some things are worth being nervous for. Like helping people? Exactly like helping people. That evening, the Castellano family hosted a celebration dinner at their house. It had become tradition, Any significant milestone in Marcus or Lily's life warranted a gathering. They ate lasagna that Diane had spent all day preparing and garlic bread that Claire had insisted on making herself, despite never having attempted it before, and producing something that was more charcoal than bread. "It's perfect," Lily declared loyally, forcing down a bite of the burned offering while Claire laughed. After dinner, while the girls were occupied with a movie in the living room, Marcus found himself on the back patio with Richard, looking out at the garden that was settling into winter dormancy. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly, "for all of it. The job, the friendship, the way you've welcomed Lily and me into your life. I don't know how to repay that." "You don't repay friendship, Marcus. That's not how it works." Richard sipped his wine, thoughtful. "But if you're looking for cosmic balance, consider it already settled. You helped my daughters when they needed it. I helped connect you with an opportunity. Now you're helping countless other parents who need it. That's not debt. That's paying it forward. Claire and Emma would have been fine that night, even if I hadn't stopped. Maybe. Or maybe they would have been stranded for hours, or gotten into a stranger's car out of desperation, or any number of things that could have gone wrong. We'll never know, which is exactly why your choice to stop mattered so much. You acted without knowing the outcome, purely because it was right." Marcus thought about that night, about how close he'd come to driving past, how different everything would be if he had. No recognition in the courtroom, no friendship with Richard, no job offer, no peer support program. His entire life had pivoted on a single moment of choosing decency over convenience. "Do you ever think about it?" Marcus asked. "How random it all was. That your daughters broke down on that specific highway, on that specific night when I happened to be driving past?" "I think about it all the time," Richard admitted. "And I don't believe in fate or destiny or any grand design. But I believe in character revealing itself in crucial moments. That night revealed yours. Everything that followed was just the natural consequence of you being who you are." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. Inside, through the windows, Marcus could see Lily laughing at something in the movie, completely at ease in this house that had become a second home. She looked happy. More than happy. She looked secure. The kind of bone-deep security that came from knowing she was loved and wanted and safe. "I used to be so angry," Marcus said suddenly. "At Jennifer, at the system, at the unfairness of working so hard and never having enough. That anger was like fuel. It kept me going, but it also burned everything it touched. And now I'm just grateful. I'm grateful I get to do work that matters. Grateful Lily's thriving. Grateful for friends who see me as an equal rather than a charity case." He turned to Richard. "Grateful that I stopped on that highway and everything that's come from it." "You know what I'm grateful for?" Richard asked. "That my daughters got to meet you. They learned something that night that no amount of money or privilege could teach them. That worth isn't determined by circumstances, that kindness can come from unexpected places, and that the measure of a person is what they do when no one's watching and there's nothing to be gained." The movie ended, and the girls came spilling out onto the patio, Lily immediately attaching herself to Marcus's leg, while Claire and Emma flanked their father. Diane appeared with a tray of hot chocolate, distributing mugs with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this countless times. "To new beginnings," Diane said, raising her mug. They all raised their cups, even Lily, who took the ritual seriously, and drank to the future that had seemed impossible 6 months ago, but now felt solid and real. Marcus drove home that night with Lily half asleep in the back seat, her new sketchbook clutched to her chest, a gift from the twins. The city lights streamed past the windows, and Marcus found himself thinking about the man he'd been before that stormy night. That man had been drowning, barely keeping his head above water, certain that survival was the best he could hope for. Now Marcus wasn't just surviving, he was living, fully and completely, in a life that had room for friendship and purpose and joy. The storm hadn't just passed, it had washed away everything that was holding him back and left space for growth he never could have imagined. At home, Marcus carried Lily inside and tucked her into bed without waking her. He stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching her sleep in the peaceful way of children who trust that tomorrow will be good. The glow-in-the-dark stars rotated slowly above her bed. The same stars that had been there through the darkest times, now casting their light on something entirely different. Marcus thought about David and the other clients he'd worked with, about the peer support program that would help them navigate their own storms, about the ripple effect of one act of kindness on a rainy highway. He thought about Jennifer, slowly rebuilding her relationship with Lily through consistency and genuine change. He thought about Richard and Diane, Anne and the twins, about how family could be chosen as much as given. His phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. First family already scheduled for peer support on Monday. Father, 2 kids, eviction notice. I assigned him to you. His name is Marcus too. Thought you'd appreciate the symmetry. Marcus smiled at that, typing back, Perfect. I'll be ready. He checked on Lily one more time, then retreated to his own room. Tomorrow he'd go to work at a job he loved, come home to a daughter who was permanently his, maybe grab coffee with Richard or help Claire with her college essay or any of a dozen other things that made up his new normal. The future stretched ahead, no longer terrifying but full of possibility. Marcus Hale had survived the storm, learned from it, and now dedicated himself to helping others weather their own. He'd gone from barely surviving to building something meaningful, from working 2 jobs to make ends meet to creating a program that would change lives. And it had all started with a simple choice on a rain-soaked highway, to stop when he had every reason to drive past, to help strangers when he could barely help himself, to choose kindness when it cost him something. That choice had saved 2 scared teenagers. But in the end, it had saved Marcus too. Not because of what he'd gained from it, but because it had reminded him of who he was at his core. Someone who showed up, who helped, who chose decency even when it was hard. That man had always been there, buried under exhaustion and fear and the weight of impossible circumstances. The storm had stripped everything away and revealed him clearly, and once seen, he couldn't be hidden again. Marcus turned off the light and lay in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of his apartment, the radiator hissing, the neighbor's muffled television, the distant traffic. These were the sounds of home, of safety, of a life hard-won and deeply valued. He closed his eyes and smiled, thinking of Lily's drawing on the refrigerator, of Patricia's text about the new client, of Richard's friendship and the work waiting for him tomorrow. He thought about storms and sunshine, about struggle and triumph, about the strange and beautiful ways that life could change when you least expected it. And for the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, Marcus Hale fell asleep not just content, but genuinely happy. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was enough. More than enough. It was exactly what he needed, exactly when he needed it. And that, Marcus thought as sleep finally claimed him, was its own kind of grace. The kind earned through perseverance and revealed through kindness. The kind that transformed storms into stories of survival, and survival into something greater, a life truly lived, fully present, deeply connected. The storm had passed, the sun had risen, and Marcus Hale was finally, completely home.